We'll call to order the Tuesday, June 12, 2022 Town Council Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6:31. And I see all councilors are present, so we have a quorum. Calendar Communications, Councilor Kasiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. On Wednesday, I volunteered at the concession stand at Burroughs Field with Councilor Parker and Councilor Franco. It was great to volunteer with the kids, or for the kids, with two of my fellow councilors. Thank you to Councilor Franco for the opportunity to volunteer. And I just got my nifty little volunteer pin, so thank you very much. On Saturday, I attended Cops and Comfort Dogs right here at Thrive 55. This very room was my happy place, filled with comfort dogs from departments from Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maryland, and New Hampshire. I just want to give a very big shout out to Officer McClelland. She is the handler for everyone's favorite furry officer, Officer Chase. This event was hosted by the Town of Groton Police Department and brought comfort dogs from all over to our community. This was a great family-friendly event where kids could talk to officers and pet their comfort dogs. I brought my kids and they came home with baseball cards from all the dogs, bags, pencils, coloring sheets, bracelets, anything swag you can think of came home with me on Saturday. And Officer McClellan and Chase were there, and I'm grateful for having them in our community and the service that they provide to our officers and dispatchers. Last night, I attended the second Town of Groton Citizen and Police Committee at the Annex. The group discussed police policies and how the department is constantly updating and training officers as new laws are enacted or updated. The chief discussed how the department is attempting to achieve CALIA level accreditation status. The group also discussed the mission statement for the group, which led to a lot of other conversations and what members would like to see the group achieve or discuss. Many members stated that they wanted the group to be a group that achieves outreach to the community. The idea of having a Citizens Police Academy was discussed. Many members discussed how they like to see the police positively interact with the community. And so I brought up events like National Night Out and the Cops and Comfort Dogs event and stated that it sounded like members wanted to see those types of events but aimed more for adults. Representative Bright from the RTM went on a ride-along and shared his positive experience and urged other members of the committee to get the first-hand experience themselves. Chair Dela Cruz suggested that the group possibly attend an implicit bias training. Members stated that they may want to see a police cruiser so that they can see the operational nature of the new dash cam systems. The town manager went over the policies that are listed on the website to see if any members wanted those policies discussed in detail in the future. I received various emails and phone calls about short-term rentals, Park Place, Mystic Parking Task Force, GLP Bridge, some information from Fran Snyder on line of duty deaths, and Branford Manor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McBride.
Thank you. I wasn't able to report last week, but I also attended the Groton Parade with many other councilors. It was an extremely wonderful event. I wanted to thank the rec department for that effort. It was great to see. It was really great to see the town council working, walking, riding together. Unfortunately, we didn't get a picture all together on social media, which was unfortunate because I think it looked like we were in unison, and I think we were. So I just wanted to thank the council for all working together on that. It looked good that we were collaborative. I also attended the Groton Long Point Parade later in that day, which was also a wonderful event, very well attended by thousands of residents as well. I also attended probably 8 or 10 Groton Babe Ruth All-Star games over the last couple weeks. Wanted to commend the seniors for coming in second place and runner-up, and the juniors coming in third place. So that was a tremendous effort, and want to thank them for their participation in the Babe Ruth and how successful they were. Also had numerous emails and so forth that Councilor Kasiri mentioned as well, so I won't go into any details on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Westervelt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received a lot of different communications on Park Place as well as STRs and just various comments about, how things are going in the town. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bordelon.
Hi, thank you. I attended this past Sunday a tenants meeting in Branford Manor where folks were discussing yet again their concerns and highlighting the deficiencies that still are current. Things were talked about as to what direction and way they should go about. It was talked that folks have been in contact with Blumenthal, HUD, I made a recommendation as a sole counselor, not for the council, but as a council member, that we probably should bring this back to the agenda, as well as collaborate again with the city to look at ways that we can unify, use some of our resources, and see if we can support, the remediation process and expediting. Also, every unit has yet to date have to be checked, only still hand-selected few, so all 400 and something units have not been inspected. I received many calls and communications about the GLP bridge, to short-term rentals, to Park Place, as well as communications from Branford Manor residents. One today, 6 years of a hole in her ceiling with water leak, and she has a bag over it to catch the water. So definitely a major concern there, followed by an injury from her child where the staircase had broken and went unfixed, and daughter ended up breaking her arm. So these are the types of things that I've been working with and going and attending, and definitely doing outreach as much as I can to help support and understand the real need and concern in that community. Thank you. Oh, the last thing. A lot of the women and families are being displaced into, some into hotels because the conditions and air qualities were quite high. Most of these hotels do not have cooking surfaces, and so I was going to ask John, the town manager, since we have the human service side in our jurisdiction, if there's any way that we as a town could maybe coordinate and maybe develop some care packages and stuff to help these families that are not able to cook at home and are having to buy food out. So is that something that we can look into, that you can coordinate with Branford Manor at all?
Well, let me first talk to Bradford. They've sworn they'll pay for food. I have a meeting with them later in the week,
Yeah.
so I'll pursue that first.
Right.
So.
One of the ladies had spoken that she was given $300, and with a family of 4 eating out, that didn't go very far. I mean, she's already burned 100 in less than a day and a half. So we have a food pantry, so I was wondering if there's any way we could maybe bring some supplements.
I'm sure we can.
And
And I know Marge has gotten a hold of, we're going to get a hold of the Groton Community Meals too. Because in terms of us providing things, they'd be in the same boat if they don't have the kitchen. They could use the same money they received to buy, but we could certainly supplement. Ideally, we'd find them something though with a cooking surface. But
Yeah,
yes,
that's
I'll
currently
talk
not
to Bradford
happening.
about
So, and that's the big concern, is the stress now of being displaced. You're getting out of the mold, but their children are living, in a one-room hotel, and the concern and anxieties are still very high there. Thank you.
Thank you. I spent the week reading and reviewing a lot of communications regarding the short-term rentals. I went over the Horsley-Witten report, of course, and I met with many people on both sides of the argument, just listening, trying to gather information in preparation for our discussion today. As well as got a lot of communications regarding the Groton Long Point Bridge, and that's what I had. Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, thank you. I too received several communications regarding short-term rentals, as well as various communications with Branford Manor residents. I did receive a constituent correspondence regarding the state of certain roads, and I'll send over that information to you, John. And then, let's see, I also read the Horsley-Witten report in depth to prepare for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also received the short-term rental Park Place and Groton Long Point Bridge emails that everybody else has received. And I was able to volunteer at the championship game for the Little League All-Stars, which was a lot of fun, and watched Waterford beat Stonington in the final. So that was a lot of fun, just to watch these kids having a great time. And I think the whole championship just was run very, very smoothly, and was a lot of fun by everybody. So that's it.
Councilor Franco?
Thank you. I had a constituent who had brought up the use of health insurance for gym memberships at the senior center, and I had brought that to Mr. Britt's attention, and I did get some response, but they're still trying to gather some more information on that. There is still a street light out over on Farmstead, over, I believe it's off Judson Avenue, that a resident had reported to me, so I just wanted to bring that up, that I'm still noticing it's still out. Let's see, numerous communications, as all the other counselors have had, both via email and in person with people. Also worked at the Snack Shack for Groton Little League. And a note is Groton Little League is looking for volunteers on Fridays at Groton City's Music in the Park, which is at Washington Park on Fridays. If you're interested, let me know. And I will say it is much, much busier than Calvin Burrows. Extremely busy. I also attended the EDC meeting and discussed vacant property program with them. It was a good conversation, and they're going to work on moving forward to have some discussion groups on that. And on my way to the meeting tonight, I stopped at Indian Field Road and watered the plants on the circles. So thank you.
Counselor Parker?
Many of the counselors have stated all the correspondence received and the volunteer hours we've done. Also had a meeting with the Board of Ed. It's negotiation time, so I had a meeting with that, and the next meeting's tomorrow night. And that is all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you. On to the approval of minutes. I make a motion to approve the committee of the whole meeting minutes for June 28th, 2022. So moved.
Second, Baumgartner.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Baumgartner. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. On to new business. Page 14, supplemental appropriation for FYE 2023. I make a motion to recommend a resolution authorizing a supplemental appropriation of $384,463 to debt service for FYE 2023.
Second, Bordelon?
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Bordelon. Manager Burt?
And I do have Dee Morrison, interim finance director, here if you want to come up. It lays it out in the agenda item. Cindy prepared this shortly before she left. With the interest rate was higher than thought. So we were short on the budgeting by $384,463 on school bonds. So we need to make up for that in our budget. That's greater than what we have for our contingency, so we're recommending that it come out of fund balance.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, this is Dee Morrison, just so everyone's met.
Welcome.
You've probably seen her around before.
Council Bordelon?
Thank you. What percent were we off by exactly?
The overall percent,
Well, first off, where's our current fund balance at as we stand?
we are estimated at 20. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. We were at 28.8 million estimated until all the numbers are final.
I'm having trouble. I'm sorry, say that again?
28.8 million. Which had us at an estimated unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the appropriations of 20.06%. If we include the $384,000 for this additional supplement, it would bring us down to 19.79%.
And is there any other options that we have to, handle this, this shortage?
No, we don't have enough contingency, so this is the only option. Our total contingency for the budget's only $300,000. And we're gonna wanna keep, that. for
And this is
later.
driven by the interest rates, right?
Yes.
Is it possible in the next budget year, since, interest rates fluctuate, it might be good to project multiple levels, like when you get a quote on something, depending on when you decide to do it, it could fall in the 2%, 3%, but if you act now, it might be 1.5.
Yep.
So I think it is really good so that we're prepared as counselors to kind of know what the possibility of an increase may be. So in the budget, we planned for one amount and there's, we're short, but it would be great to see, like, if this moves up to this percent, we might be staring down the barrel of this. Why is that important to me? I think it helps to forecast because it might change other people's decisions on the back end on how they vote on budget. If this percent had gone up any more and this number was even higher, it could have been a really big problem. Thank God we have a hefty rainy day fund. So is there any way to kind of, when we're voting on this, kind of add in the next level of a possible increase? Just guesstimate numbers, not hard numbers, but ways so that we can kind of see where this could go.
So the municipal advisor that we work with on this, he provided some preliminary numbers, early on, and he did that based on comparable sales at that time. I can ask him if he can maybe project additional
I'm sure you could run couple
numbers
more
and
scenarios,
scenarios.
Yeah, I just think that would be great, fiscally responsible too. And like anybody who owns anything, we always are looking for all the numbers, interest rates and things are always changing. So even just adding 2% on to that, just so we can kind of prepare and, put a range number so that we're a little bit more prepared. But thank you so much.
Okay.
Counselor Baumgartner?
Yes, I know in the next agenda item will be reallocating bond proceeds. Could we hypothetically apply those bond proceeds from the roads rehabilitation to the Groton 2020?
As far as for the overage here,
Yes, towards debt service.
so I do know that the note portion of this, so we have bonds and we have notes, the short-term notes. The note interest cannot be paid from the school construction project because the schools have now been placed in service. Legally, they're not allowed to be paid out of that fund. So that is why we were budgeting for it from the general fund this year. So I could look into that and get back to you
Okay.
if any portion of that could try to offset.
Because I know it's almost, it's about 368,000 for the bond proceeds, so that's almost in line with the projected debt, so the overage.
Yep. Okay.
Could defray some of the costs.
Okay, I can look into that and get back.
All right, thank you.
All right, seeing,
Just quickly, if we were to approve this evening and based off of our findings, could we
I can make a
that change?
recommendation at the regular meeting to switch it.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
thank you.
And part of the next item, is that being used to kind of float us till we get the repayment from, how does that work towards the repayment from the state for the final numbers?
The note, we've been kind of working with the municipal advisor as far as the note piece of it to cover what the reimbursement from the state would be.
Right. It's gonna be 2 to 3 years minimum before we get our, I forgot what percentage it is.
It's an 11%
11%
retainage.
back from the state, so that's part of what that is. So we'll be floating things, likely, and we're trying to not do another bond, so, but we'll look into it. Or do more than we need to on it, so we don't have interest. But certainly we can find that out by next time.
Thank you, John. Indeed.
Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you just explain the difference between notes and bonds?
Bonds are usually for a longer period of time, we typically do these for 20 years. The notes are short-term. They are a short-term borrowing, so we'll borrow it as of, April 2022, and the full amount is due as of April 2023, including interest.
So it might be like a year.
Mhm.
1 year.
And so we'll just
Over 1
keep,
year.
until the state reimburses us that 11% retainage, we'll probably just keep rolling the note amount and borrowing that same amount, and hopefully the interest will be.
And did we have interest problems on both of these? Is that what
Yes.
happened?
Yes.
It happened on both. Okay.
The note was 217,602, and the bonds was 166,861.
Okay, okay, good, thank you.
Counselor Bordelon?
My last question is, how often is the percent reassessed? Is it just once a year?
The percent for.
For the increases that we pay, we just pay it once a year?
For the notes?
Correct, for the one we're talking, the agenda
Yes,
item.
it's just a one-time payment.
Whereas the bond, once you lock it in, it's whatever it's scheduled for that number of years, so you're just locked in for the entire time.
And around about what time are we forecasting our percent increase that we're gonna owe?
As far as for the next,
We don't know what it would be. It might, we have.
No, I'm
no idea
asking
what
like each year, when does that come out and it's determined what percent we're forecasting for?
Usually we go around that same time in the April, May
April.
timeframe.
April. So April, the number, so yeah, it would seem it could be pulled again in like June or something, later to see what changes may have been made.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right, seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining.
thank you.
On to reallocation of excess bond proceeds, Groton 2020 plan. Page 15, I make a motion to recommend a resolution to reallocate excess bond proceeds from the road maintenance and rehabilitation project to the Groton 2020 plan. So moved.
Second, Bordelon?
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Bordelon.
And as you'll see, there's, from our road maintenance bonds, road maintenance rehabilitation bonds, there's 368,528 in funds remaining. We've passed the time we can actually spend those on roads, though. So you can transfer over and use it towards the Groton 2020, but you can't do any more actual construction projects.
Okay.
Because if you remember, I think it was a 5-year bond issuance, so we had to wrap up any construction during that time. So we're just moving it to use it.
Counselor McBride?
Are we able to put that into the general fund, or are we not able to do that? Fund balance?
No, it's restricted funds.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Franco?
So we can't use it for roads, so we can put it over into the Groton 2020 plan, but aren't we done with the Groton 2020 plan? Basically, aren't we
The
wrapping that up?
construction's done, yeah, just paying things off.
So we would use that to help pay it off, is
Right,
that what you're
right,
saying?
right.
Not use it for maintenance or any other, or
Correct.
building or any of that
No,
such things?
no.
It's to pay off those bonds?
Right.
And we can't use it to pay off the bond that we have for the road maintenance? We can't just pay it off that bond earlier, or apply it towards that? Why would we apply it towards the schools and not towards its own
Yeah.
bonding?
Cindy said this was the way to do it, and I can't remember now. It's been like 2 months since we talked about it. She said this was what we needed to do. I don't know, did she talk to you about that at all?
She did not, but I can touch base with her and ask.
Yeah, I'm just curious, why would we apply it to something totally different than its own bonding?
I don't know if, because of the type of funding it was, if it's allowed to be used to pay the debt payments for that. So I can look into that and get back to you.
All right. Well, if it's going to help pay off the Groton 2020 plan debt, I guess it's here or there, but it's curious as to why it wouldn't pay off its own debt. But I'll be in favor of
I
this.
think part of it is that those bonds have been issued and we're making regular payments, whereas we're already locked in and we're just trying to get through and not incur more interest rate, because you can't refinance the bonds anyway, so we're just trying to alleviate any interest issue, but I'll find out.
All right. I'll be in favor of this, and unless, like Counselor Baumgartner's question, you come up with different information at our next meeting. Thank you.
Counselor Jones?
Thank you. So you say here, this kind of bond was made just for doing road maintenance and rehabilitation, but I know we're I think, purchasing some equipment in Public Works. Could it be used to pay for equipment in one of those dump trucks?
I don't, no, that's not part of the original bond issuance.
So it has to be used
Right.
for something that it was originally designed for, or put
Or
into,
bond, right.
or something different. Okay, all right, okay.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. Is this, I guess my question going to the area that is the highest level, out of all the other things that we have open, is this the, like, the target one that will make the biggest splash for us tax-wise?
This was Cindy's recommendation for yes, that was her indication.
And what is that bond at, and what would it come down to if we allocated this as you guys are recommending in this?
Well, part of it is we don't know what we're gonna issue next until we see what the state's doing, for one thing. So it's hard to say what exactly, unless you have more. I think it's hard to predict for next spring what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I don't have any predictions.
And there's a bit of an effort to push the state to try to get some reimbursement quicker, so there'll be some efforts like that, because it takes an inordinate amount of time to get it back.
So this excessive amount is gonna go to what we have bonded for the schools is the plan?
Correct.
And we don't know what that number is currently?
For how much is out there in bonds?
Yes, for the schools, and what this will do to that? Because it says what we're doing with it, but.
Well, it's not gonna affect the current bonds. I think it's more about the next set of bonds I get,
And
next
so it won't
bond, I
affect
don't
the
think
ones
it's
now.
issued, yeah,
So it'll be next year's bond.
right. That's my impression. I'll double check though.
Because I too have the same question, kind of similar questions, is to make sure, like, it's one thing to, it's great to have an excess, but it's important to move it into an area that's gonna make the largest impact, and I just wanna make sure this is projected to be the best plan of action to make sure, taxpayers and, debt service, as we're paying down, keeping our score high, that we're moving these funds that are gonna, make the biggest impact. And that's the question as to why this one, I think, is a good question. So, thank you.
All right, seeing no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. Thank you. On to Groton Long Point Bridge, page 16. See, we have Director Hanover. Who else do we have?
We have Andre St. Germain. He's our project manager with AECom, our consultant engineer.
Thank you. And from Groton Long Point? You're gonna need a mic.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We all set, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Well,
Yes.
thank you, everybody, for coming. Again, Greg Hanover, Director of Public Works. I have Andre St. Germain from AECom, our consultant engineer, for the past 10 years. He hasn't been working on it for 10 years, but the firm has been, formerly URS. Yes, this project has gone back 10 years. We actually had our first public listening session back in August of 2012 up at the Annex, when we just had the public in and listened to their input on this project. From that, we've developed a number of studies, some structure studies, hydraulic studies, plans. We've gone back a couple times to the public for informational meetings. The last one was back in August 8th of 2019. During those years, there was quite a few years when we did not have funding, so the project did kind of stall a little bit, but we have been keeping it moving forward. The last thing we did was we actually had an ad hoc working group put together
of stakeholders, and we started meeting in October of 2020, right after we got through the initial phases of COVID, and we had about 7 meetings with this group, and I think there's a slide that'll tell you who was on that group. It was a very good technical discussion. We gave a lot of good input to our engineers, and from those meetings, they have developed some preliminary plans, which we're here tonight to present to you, update you, tell you the next steps to move forward, and get a couple of items that we need a little bit of maybe some council direction on, so we want to talk about those things. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Andre, who can walk through the plans as they are today.
All right, thank you, Greg. Is this working okay? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to present here. As Greg said, my name is Andre St. Germain. I'm the project manager for AECOM. We've been hired by the town of Groton to perform the preliminary design of this structure. I'll go through a little PowerPoint here. I'll start with some project background, talk about what the goals of the project, main objectives, talk a little bit about the existing bridge and the need for the project, talk about the task force meetings that Greg talked about. These were really good. It was sort of a working meeting where we made key decisions, key design decisions, had a lot of good discussion and input. So those I was really impressed with how those worked. And then lastly, I'll show you the proposed design plans, go through a couple renderings, also talk about project cost and schedule. Just a quick location map. I know everyone's familiar. Groton Long Point Road Bridge is a critical piece of infrastructure. It's the only vehicular bridge that connects Groton Long Point and Mumford Cove with the rest of Groton. And here's a blown up aerial. Project limits are from East Shore Ave over on the west to Esker Point Bridge on the Esker Point Beach on the east. Here's the bridge here. I would like to point out these two properties here, 991 and 981. These properties are most impacted by the project, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the project goals, first and foremost always, is provide a safe bridge crossing for both vehicles and pedestrians, and to that I'd also add bicyclists. Provide causeway capable of withstanding a storm surcharge. I know there was some damage here during Hurricane Sandy. We had a lot of discussion during the task force meetings about improving the resiliency of the causeway. Providing a structure that's economical to build and easy to maintain, minimizing environmental impacts, and providing an aesthetic structure that complements the area. It's a beautiful area. We want to construct a beautiful bridge to tie it together. Here is the existing bridge. It's built in 1935. The roadway is 30 feet wide currently from curb to curb. It's got 3-foot shoulder, 12-foot lane, 12-foot lane, 3-foot shoulder. Overall, so the state inspects this bridge every 2 years. Currently it's rated as a poor condition, so that's one of the main driving factors of the project. Not to alarm anybody though, the bridge is safe. After poor comes serious and then critical. That's when you start inspecting the bridge every year. You may start to restrict the weight loads that can cross the bridge. So we're not there yet, but we want to address the bridge now while it's not an emergency. Now's the time to do it. We did have 3 public info meetings, the last in August 2019. We've got a lot of good comments during those meetings, a lot about safety, pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, fishermen stand in the shoulders and use that. I know there's kids that jump off the bridge, and so there's concern about that and adding railings. There's also a lot of comments from boaters, increasing the vertical clearance below the bridge, doing some improvements to the channel, and all these comments were noted and incorporated. Many of them were incorporated. So we had these task force meetings. The task force was made up of the 9 people you see here. A really good representation, a few counselors, a couple members from RTM, members from Groton Long Point Association, Resiliency Task Force, so a lot of different backgrounds. It really made for some good conversation. And I think these task force meetings were really good because we didn't design the bridge and then present it at the task force meetings. It was sort of an iterative process where we'd take a critical design decision and spend an entire meeting talking about it, hearing different points of view. We'd go back to the drawing board, make some changes to the design, come back the next meeting, talk about the changes, and then move on to the next important design decision. So I think that worked really well. So now I will actually try to close out of the PowerPoint and open up, I have a PDF. Of the plans. All right. So this is the existing bridge. It's a little small to see. Here's a plan view. So this is looking down from the sky directly at the bridge. It's got a 50-foot clear span from abutment face to abutment face. And here's what it looks like in elevation view. So if you were in a boat, this is what you would see looking at the bridge. Again, the 50-foot clear span. Important to note here, the existing bridge is founded on these timber piles. So these are like telephone poles that go way down, much deeper than what's shown here. Here's a typical section. So if you take a slice right through the bridge, here you've got a 3-foot shoulder, a 12-foot lane, a 12-foot lane, a 3-foot shoulder. There's no sidewalks on the current bridge. It's about 35 feet from out to out. So that just gives a little bit of context into, now here's the proposed bridge. We jumped from a 50-foot clear span in the existing condition to an 86-foot clear span in the proposed condition. And the reason I brought up those timber piles or telephone poles is we're actually building the proposed abutments behind the existing. So you don't have to worry about removing those timber piles. You just build right behind it. And here's an elevation view showing the 86-foot clear span. We're also increasing the vertical clearance by 3 feet and doing some improvements to the channel bottom. And here is a look at the proposed section. So again, this is taking a slice right through the bridge, 5-foot bike lane, 11-foot travel lane, 11-foot travel lane, 5-foot bike lane, and then a 5.5-foot sidewalk. So overall, the bridge is being widened by about 5 feet. That's 40 feet 6 inches versus the 35 feet. Jump back to the PowerPoint. So I'll show you the roadway plans in just a minute, but I want to talk quickly about the profile. So that's the elevation of the roadway throughout the project limits. This was really a driving decision for the entire project. We are constrained because there is federal funding involved in this. We need to use federal design criteria. And so they require the roadway to be at a certain elevation above a 100-year storm. A major goal of ours was to improve the resiliency of the bridge and causeway, and that's considering future sea level rise. We want to increase the elevation of the roadway as much as possible. However, on the opposite hand, we want to also minimize impacts to the abutting properties. Those things kind of work opposite from each other. You can't raise up the roadway too much, then you're going to be impacting those properties. So it's sort of a balancing act that we had to go through. This is a very busy slide, so I apologize for that. I won't get into too many technical details. But it is an important kind of discussion to set the stage for why we chose the profile that we did. So those federal design criteria, they require you to be a certain 1 foot above the 100-year storm, which is elevation 9.7. So they require the roadway to be at 10.7, and they require the top of the bridge to be at 15.4. Additionally, we talked about the resiliency and accounting for sea level rise. So in the year 2050, sea level is supposed to increase by 1.64 feet. So in addition to the 10.7, we're actually increasing it even more to 11.34. Now compare that to existing. We're comparing that, for instance, at 991 and 981 Groton Long Point Road. This is where the low point in the existing road is, about 7.8. So we're looking at, what's that, 4.5 feet, raising the road up in front of their houses. On the other hand, top of bridge, 15.4 compared to the existing of 9.3. We're talking about raising the bridge up 6 feet. We talked about this at the task force meetings, not really feasible. So the federal standards do allow you to request design exceptions if meeting this criteria is unreasonable for cost, for rights-of-way impacts, for environmental impacts, and there's a slam dunk case against that because raising the road up that much would impact those properties too much. We'd be talking about property takes and not easements. So we talked in the task force meetings and we had to find a balancing point. So the 50-year storm is elevation 7.6. We're proposing edge of roadway at elevation 8.6. So that's a big cut versus the 11.34, but we're still raising it versus existing. The top of bridge at 13.3, so we're raising the existing by 4 feet, but that's a cut of about 2 feet versus the standard. So there's a balancing act, but this is what needed to be done in order to provide those property owners with a driveway that is usable and maintainable and safe. So I'll hop back up to the plan views and go through a couple things with the roadway plans. So this is the profile. The dashed line is the existing roadway, and this is the existing bridge. This solid line is the proposed roadway. So you can see how much we're bringing it up versus existing. And then similarly, you can see how much we're raising up the bridge. Again, that's to improve the resiliency of the causeway. Here's the roadway plan. This is 991, this is 981. Again, these are the two properties that are impacted most. This line here is what's known as a cut fill line. So that's basically the limit of disturbance. So by raising the road up, this is how much we're impacting this property. And so you can imagine if we had gone more to the 100-year storm, it'd be into the garage. But this driveway is feasible. It's about a 15% grade, which is safe, and this is kind of the happy place, happy medium that we were able to find. So in the plan view, you can see the 5-foot bike lane, 11-foot lane, 11-foot lane, 5-foot bike lane, 5-foot 6-inch shoulder along the south edge. The sidewalk could not be placed on the north edge of roadway because it would make these impacts that much worse. That slope would be pushed back by that 5'6". This line here is the right-of-way line. This is 1000 Groton Long Point Road. So the sidewalk is within the street line. It's not on private property all the way across. And the sidewalk goes from East Shore Ave here all the way to Esker Point Bridge on the other side. Goes across and ends here. So I'm almost done. Go through a couple renderings. Here's just the existing bridge, and then here's the proposed bridge. This was a rendering we did early on, and so it's not 100% accurate of the plans I just showed you, but it's pretty close. It does not account for the raising of the elevation. It also does not account for the increased span length, but it does show the bike lane, the 11-foot travel lanes, the bike lane, and the sidewalk. This particular rendering has an open steel bridge railing and aesthetic lighting. So this is what it could look like, except for those points that I mentioned. Total project is estimated to cost around $6.7 million. That's in 2021 dollars. That does not include rights-of-way acquisition, relocation of utilities, or inflation. There is federal funding. So one option would be to do the federal local bridge program, in which 80% is federally funded and 20% is town funded. There is a brand new program that's coming out, or that just came out, where the feds will actually participate 100%, and that's as a result of the federal infrastructure bill that was passed. So we're gathering more information about that. Next steps would be to have a 4th public information meeting, present the concept, look for a design concept approval, apply for funding, then move into semifinal and final design, and finally construction. Here's a look at the preliminary schedule. So we're here in 2022. We could finish preliminary design this year, start final design next year. That's about a 2-year process, which seems like a long time, but there's federal funding involved, so there's a specific process. Connecticut DOT needs to do their reviews, and permits take a long time to obtain. Start construction in 2025. It's a 2-year construction. It'll be staged with alternating one-way traffic, so stage 1 will be 1 season, and stage 2 will be the 2nd season. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I do have a couple other items I did want to address. Thank you, Andre, for that. The first is, I know you all got a letter from Mike Flynn, President of the Groton Long Point Association, regarding their request to remove the sidewalk from the bridge to East Shore Avenue. I certainly respect that opinion, but I do want to point out a few things, in regards to his rationale for that decision. One is, he says his major impacts to 1000 Groton Long Point Road. Well, as you just saw, the impacts are to the 2 houses that are in Noank, which are closer to the bridge. The impact to 1000 really is only raising the sidewalk 6 inches. And as Andre said, all the work there is within the existing right-of-way. So the only real impact is he'd have a sidewalk in front of his house. There's no impact of raising the grade as much as we are at the other 2 properties. It was also noted that the cost of the sidewalk would be $1 million. Well, I'm not sure where that number came from, because the total amount for the sidewalk for the whole project is $100,000. And then the last one has to do with the right-of-way. I think it's still Groton Long Point's opinion that they own that right-of-way, certainly not the town's opinion. It was deeded to the town in 1914 for highway purposes. It went to the state for a short while when they constructed this bridge. The state gave it back to us in 1964. We have never relinquished that title. Eric Callahan provided an excellent letter that kind of summarizes that in 2016, and I think you all got a copy of that from Manager Burt. I would ask you to read that, and it's our opinion that, you know, the right-of-way is the town's, and that, you know, we have the right to put that sidewalk in. And then lastly, and I think most importantly, is, you know, I'm currently serving on the Complete Streets Task Force, and we're with Councilor Baumgartner's chair. We're developing a policy. We'll be bringing it to the council fairly soon, I'm sure. And certainly, having a sidewalk, having pedestrian safety in a project like this, or not putting it in would contradict or be in violation of any type of complete streets policy that anybody would develop. I mean, this is a perfect example of when you want to put sidewalks in a project like this. So that is my comment on that. And the second item I just want to bring up, Andre kind of mentioned the new federal bridge program. I have been keeping in contact with the DOT engineers that are in charge of the federal bridge program, and they reached out to me last week, and I did meet with them, and they told me about this new program that has just come out where they will fund 100% of this project, design and construction, so there'll be no town funds at all used for this project. The only caveat is that we have to use their design engineer going forward, their on-call engineer, which unfortunately AECOM is not one of them. So we're not really starting over, but we'd take it from this point and go forward, very similar to this process you saw tonight, where we have another public informational meeting. The town would still be involved in the design process. You know, it's not like we're just gonna get out of it and let the state go do this. We're still very much involved in it. The state would take over inspection during construction, which is nice because it would alleviate, you know, some cost to us. So it really, I think, you know, we just have to get some information to the state, and they'll help us put an application together for that program. And they said, you know, this is probably a slam dunk to get approved for that program. So with that, I think I will open it up for discussion.
Thank you. Councilor Kassiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Hanover, I know you're saying that the design engineer would have to be the state, but do you foresee this program drastically changing the design of the bridge?
No, I was concerned about that, and when I talked to DOT, they said, no, whatever we've come up with to date, they would just basically keep it moving forward. As long as it met all the federal guidelines and regulations, in which it does, it would stay, you know, the elevations would all stay the same, and you know, the sidewalks and the causeway, all that would be included. The only thing they did not know is if we chose to put all those overhead utilities underground, if that would be an eligible reimbursement cost. So that's still something we would have to look into.
Okay, great. And also, are sidewalks required for any of these bridge funding programs?
No, they're not required.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Andre and Mr. Hanover. That was great. I think I understand right that you're building really a 50-year bridge and not a 100-year bridge. And the reason you did the 50-year is so that it less impact on the surrounding houses. Is that, did I read that right?
The bridge itself structurally will be good for 75 to 100 years. But we're just looking at coming up with a compromise for the elevations.
You're talking about the storm elevations?
The storm
Yeah, not the
elevations.
not the lifespan of the bridge,
Yeah.
but
But you made that decision based on what the world thinks is going to happen in 50 years, so that sort of dictates certain criteria for that bridge. If you said we're going to look at 100-year storms, you would have gone.
We would have gone higher,
You would
but
have gone much higher.
the rights-of-way impacts would have gotten out of hand,
Okay.
basically.
yeah, we probably would have been purchasing those two properties on the right there as you come in, and they're actually in Noack, that side of the road.
So whether we built for a 50-year storm or a 100-year storm, the normal lifespan of this bridge would be 75 years?
Correct. That won't be impacted. Really, what's impacted is, will the bridge stay dry during a storm?
Okay. By dry, meaning water going over the top of it or
Yeah.
going underneath
Yeah.
it?
Over the top.
Over the top of it. So you're high enough that the water will go, unless you had a 100-year surge
Right.
20 years from now?
Right.
Okay. If, was the damage from, what was the damage that was done from Hurricane Sandy that had sort of pushed this along?
I believe it was, some of the riprap had been washed away, and I think there was some washout on the roadway itself, some undermining that occurred. Do you
Yeah.
know more?
Yeah, the bridge itself is actually not the low point of this road. The low point is in front of 981, which is the red house there, yeah, down in that area. So the bridge, nothing happened to the bridge in Superstorm Sandy, but as Andre said, the road was, washed out a little bit. Some guardrail posts got washed out, but, nothing major. And you can see the seaweed and stuff in the front yard of 981, where the waves had overtopped the road.
Okay, so you're kind of building, you want to cover that whole span, not just the bridge part, but the whole
Yeah,
thing
We're
wants to be
rebuilding the
protected.
whole causeway.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my other comment is just on the sidewalk issue, is someone who has walked every single street in Groton, City of Groton, Noank, and Groton Long Point. I understand completely the value of having sidewalks and safety. It's paramount that it has to be, we need sidewalks, and having walked everywhere multiple times in Groton, I'm a big fan of sidewalks, so I encourage and hope that the sidewalks will maintain and stay there for the entire project, so, all right, thank you.
Council Bordelon?
Thank you. Thank you for this PowerPoint. Is there any way that we could have it also emailed to us?
Yes.
Because that one page that you said was a little, there were some good notes on there that I'd like. So
Sure, absolutely.
I'd love to have it. So, when looking at the resiliency and sustainability and the coastal rise, it is concerning that we have to downgrade, but I also feel like we have to protect the residents that are being impacted. What was the feel or pulse of the residents when presented with like the option to go up or down? I mean, they were more for it being at a lower grade, I would assume.
I'd have
Or
to
have they been
defer
contacted?
to Greg.
No, we have not personally contacted them
Okay.
individually at this point.
Yeah. I think it'd be important to see what their feel on it is. I guess I can see the 50-year projection, but we want a bridge where if there was a major storm, people could get out. And if it's already flooding down at the lower level where those houses are, eventually in time, those houses on the Noank side there are probably going to go under at some point. I'm concerned with scaling back, but I also think we should bring the folks around the table. I think everyone should understand like what the compromise is when spending this much money when we have the option to go higher. Cosmetically, it probably would look really strange in that low-lying area. So I definitely would support the middle road, obviously, but I think it would be important to start some outreach with those residents that are going to directly be around there. I know you said there might be a public, another public meeting, which has been great. I remember the first one at the annex. But maybe some way of getting a paper on their door or something and encouraging them to actually come to that meeting if they hadn't already, and just getting some of their input of what they're seeing from these presentations. I definitely also could support a sidewalk too. I know with ADA compliance and people who are blind and deaf, there are some regulations where when they're walking on an average road that just has a line, they can't feel. A sidewalk provides the ADA compliance issues where people could kind of guide themselves back because you have those rigid ends at either side, and they can feel on the edge that there's a drop-off. When you have a flat road, you really can't. And so it's a nice option because some folks may want to be able to go for a walk. So I'm definitely interested to see what those options look like. But definitely a concern with the sea rise, and that's a drastic number that is going to come up. Definitely, the bridge does need to be fixed, so that's obvious. But I do think it's important when a person who's living on Groton Long Point and wants to walk out of the neighborhood or beyond, that park gets kind of narrow because the bridge is old and tight, and having that shoulder that's a defined area. I know my children and other children in the area, when I drive down there, they're on their bikes and stuff, and it's not wide enough, and they're coming over the line. So having a defined pedestrian area with a bike area is really going to improve the quality and the whole thing down there. So my question is also with I think it's great if there's an opportunity to get 100% funded. It'll be interesting to see what that would look like, and as that was to move forward. So I appreciate Greg, you bringing that forward. I think that's definitely a lot different. And if we have to pay for the cost of the utilities to be rerouted, that's a large cost, but it's way smaller than what we were staring down. So
Councilor's time has expired.
those are my questions for now. But if I have more, I will speak again. So thank you for your presentation, though. Thank you.
Councilor McBride.
Thank you. Great presentation. I've been involved with this, so I appreciate everything that you've done on this project. I do have a couple of questions, comments. That 100% program change description, is there a possibility that if we go for that program, we're going to have to increase it to that additional amount from the 4 feet to the 6 feet?
No, as long as we get the, as Andre said, those design exceptions, which I think, as he said, we would because of the right-of-way impacts, as long as it meets the federal requirements, whether it's the 80/20 or the 100% reimbursement, I don't see that being any different.
All right, I thought you had said we have to follow the federal guidelines. I didn't know if that would then require us to be up to 6 feet, the original plan.
Yeah, those federal design criteria will not differ no matter which funding program you choose.
Thank you.
They're still subject to the same design exception.
Okay. Then I have a couple of other questions. I'm wondering why the various programs weren't provided to the council. And I'm just wondering if the council could consider, or at least receive all of the information that was submitted as part of the group, because there were 5 or 6 different options with different costs, and I think the council should at least see those different options that were available. Because, from what I understand, this decision on number 3, which is coming to the council, there was no vote or anything of that committee to why this decision was made. So I'd like to see the various options provided to the council, as well as this option that is recommended. And the reason I'm saying that is because I am concerned about the cost. The cost was originally supposed to be $4.1 million in the documents that I reviewed a few years ago, and now we're at, I forget what it was,
6.7.
6.7, so that's a big jump, and that was in $21. So concerned about the inflated cost. Obviously, if you can get 100% funding, my concern is not there anymore. But I just think it would be important to see all the different options, to compare the different costs of the different programs. Because this original project was a Groton Long Point Bridge, and I think it's extended into 5 different scenarios that are beyond the Groton Long Point Bridge. And I think the council should make the determination on whether or not this bridge should move forward, or should we extend the scope to these other options. I also have concerns, and I'm in complete favor of this project, so don't get me wrong, but I do have concerns. I've had many residents come up to me, as you noted today in the email from Mike Flynn regarding the sidewalk. And I'm a proponent of sidewalks, but I am concerned that based upon the information that was provided to us, and it's more of a legal matter, but there's a 2016 legal opinion, there's a town manager opinion that he agreed, there's a town attorney in 1998 that states, the same thing, that this is association land. The previous director of Public Works, Gary Schneider, stated the same thing, that this is Groton Long Point land. And my concern is that if we move forward without Groton Long Point's involvement in this, there's going to be a lawsuit. And I don't want to see that. This bridge needs to get done, but I do want everyone to know that potential does exist. So I would be in favor of trying to see if we can accommodate both sides and move this project, because the last thing we want is this project delayed another 10 years. So I would look forward to somehow working together if we can. The most important concern I have, however, is the lack of one thing that isn't in this plan. This is the recently developed bridge on Mosher Avenue. And as you can see from these pictures, they clearly addressed the need for the concern for public safety. This plan doesn't do that. And my concern is every day when you drive by there in the summertime, kids are jumping, and it's a major public safety issue. So I don't know how it gets addressed. and I don't know if we changed the plans to address this, but this is what needs to happen on that bridge. And the worst thing that this council could have happen is somebody jumps off this bridge in 5 years because we didn't put up any barricades like they're on Mosher Avenue, and someone gets hurt or someone dies. This council's aware that this bridge is being replaced, and we should have made accommodations to address that public safety issue. So that's my major concern. I just wanted to bring attention to everyone. And I look forward to seeing the complete streets policy. Wish I would have seen it before this meeting. And one other thing, when we have the public hearing presentation, I agree with Portia Bordelon that we should inform by mail all those affected homeowners with drawings of how that property is going to be affected, because although 15% may not seem like a lot, when I drive down the hill and you see an 11% upgrade, it's pretty significant. So these residents should know that that's going to be a 15% upgrade, because that's substantial. So the only other thought I would have is, I know there's proponents of sidewalks here. Would moving the plan without the sidewalk, moving the plan to the left or to the south, decrease the percentage? If you got rid of the sidewalk and you move the plan over instead of the sidewalk, what would the 15% be? Because theoretically, that decline would drastically decrease if you're saving 5 feet of sidewalk.
Thank you. Counselor's time has expired.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we did look at that, but as you can see, I mean, it's a straight road from the bridge to the properties there. So you'd have to have like a reverse curve or some crazy thing in there to do what you're talking about, to move the whole road over to the south to have less impact on those properties.
But you'd have 5 more feet of room, so the elevation decrease would be less.
I mean, we did look at that, and I don't recall the exact particulars of why we discounted that, but we did look at trying to shift the road around, and you know, what we presented tonight was, you know, really the best solution that we came up with.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Baumgartner.
Yes, I just want to thank Andre for your diligence and obviously a lot of hard work, and certainly Greg Hanover for your continued involvement in leading the charge on the town side. As was mentioned, I was part of the working group along with Councilor Bordelon and Councilor McBride in his capacity as I believe GLP president at the time, and we've been working together for a few years now. Had a series of meetings, as was mentioned, in very iterative and interactive process, and Mike as well, you know, having conversations about certainly the importance of raising the bridge because of the level of sea rise. We'll get, you know, as mentioned, 20-inch sea level rise by 2050, which is quite substantial. And our current bridge is certainly not prepared for that, as evident by the riprap and washout during Hurricane Sandy. We have received a lot of different proposals. I know we received a proposal to have a fishing pier. We've had proposals for sidewalks, even a proposal where sidewalks on both sides of the road. Bike lanes, which I was very happy to see included in this project, 5 feet, and vehicular lanes at multiple sizes, ranging from between 11 and 12 feet. We brought it down because they, and what we've learned from the Complete Streets meetings is that wider lanes induce higher, induce drivers to travel at much faster speeds. And so anything we can do to reduce speeding along that corridor, especially since there are kids currently, especially in the summer months, jumping, into the cove there. So, but, I do think, as Councilor Jones and Councilor Bordelon stated, it is important to incorporate sidewalks. And, we are not including sidewalks on both sides of the road. We're including it on one side. It was also mentioned that maybe we should consider a fishing pier, and maybe that's something we, consider as I don't want to say an amendment to the project, but if that's something that people feel strongly about, well, maybe we should explore including that as well. That's where things obviously get more costly, but one question I have in particular for the Groton Long Point Association is what is the, I don't want to say the opposition, but the reticence to have a sidewalk along the bridge?
You up those yet or not? I don't know, Mr. Mayor.
You can answer.
Oh, okay, that was a question, thank you. Thank you, Counselor. The main opposition is traffic in and out of Groton Long Point. Groton Long Point, as we know, is a chartered, not a borough, it's a chartered association. Whereas the streets, the sidewalks, and as you mentioned about your streets and sidewalks, we're not part of it and part of that program because we're private at that point. So it keeps the traffic a little bit less. We do have the bike lanes, which now are a little smaller, but they'll be bigger with the new bridge at that point. And the travel has been on this bike lanes for quite a while at that point there. Our real concern actually is we don't need a sidewalk, actually. We need a fishing pier to keep the fishermen off the road. A sidewalk does not give you a benefit of keeping them off the road. They'll put their fishing poles 3 or 4 feet into the road because they're that big. They're actually there, can jump, there's quite a bit of them. As you mentioned about the young children, preventing that is important. But we've all grown up there actually, and it's kind of hard to do that in a lot of areas. But the fishing pier will keep them away from the roadway as well too. The key thing is, it's a cement barrier on the fishing pier. It's not a sidewalk of 3 or 4 feet where a car can vary into that at that point there and hurt someone without a doubt. And thank God we haven't had many problems. It's a safety issue, there's no doubt. But the benefit of that outweighs the sidewalk issue at that point. Secondly, and I'll present afterwards about, for you actually, about some of our reasons, as I mentioned in the letter to you, at that point, why and what we should be doing.
Now, you mentioned the fear of a car kind of veering into the sidewalk. I know that sometimes you can install like these, almost like barriers, plastic. I know we have them out along Thomas Road by the, where we do have bike lanes at the kind of the corners there. Just plastic.
Yeah, they're reflecting.
Reflecting.
Like delineators.
Delineators, yeah.
Could you hypothetically install, say, if you were, we have 11-foot wide lanes, have one foot reserved to put those along the actual bridge so that, you could better protect and shield the pedestrians and cyclists?
Thank you. Councilor's time has expired.
I think that could be an option, yeah.
Just a thought. Thank you both. And thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you.
Councilor Bordelon?
Yes, for the gentleman presenting tonight, Andre, my understanding, I've seen some bridges where they had the fishing pier over the sidewalk kind of one and the same, actually. So it could fit both, where you have the ability to walk, and if you wanted to go on the fishing pier, it would be like right there to your right or left, depending on what side we're talking here. But there is a way, a design could be made that it could be a functioning sidewalk as well as a fishing pier.
That could be done.
Yeah, right. Right.
One thing I also just want to mention is if you wanted the fishing pier to be a separate structure from the bridge, that would not be eligible for federal funding. It has to be one in the same structure.
Right.
So what you're talking about would, I think, be covered if it's all part of the same structure.
Right, because if we start to add a fishing pier, that takes away from probably the funding side. So the sidewalk actually supports like more of the states. I don't know. I don't have the state thing in front of me, so I can't speak to that. But there is a way we could do that. I also like Councilor McBride's idea about the cover. Again, we need to have folks from down there talking about it. I like that too because they put them above highways because people were throwing boulders off the sides. Someone could get hurt. I mean, as we elevate this bridge, it takes one kid to break a neck jumping off. So we're going up a lot. So that is a concern. This structure, as presented, is just an example. There are other types, but this structure will not really attract fishermen. This is going to be hard to fish. So that's where that sidewalk with the combination of the pier kind of, jutted out along there would allow the protection and allow the ability to be able to cast a line and still enjoy that because that area is long, history of people sitting there fishing off the side, but we also want to deter the jumping. So there might have to be some kind of combination. So we can say we want a fishing pier, but we also want a thing. This wouldn't allow to fish, and, you know, so maybe there's some in between, and that's what I wanted to ask. Is that something we'd have to send back to the drawing board? Because that wouldn't be in any of the presentation at the annex had like the 3 or 4 options, and that was not presented as an option with a combination pier to fit those needs as long with a sidewalk.
Yeah, I think that's something we would have to think about and consider how we could add a fishing pier and what length it comes out and how is it connected with the rest of the structure.
Yeah, and I think a sidewalk is important too, because we live in a wintered area, and folks that want to walk in the winter, having a place that can be shoveled gives people access. You know, it's good to leave your house and walk on foot, and so that sidewalk provides that safety in the winter as well, to be off the shoulder and off. So I'm in support of some kind of combination there or structure, but I think, you know, obviously more research, but I do think that now we're at the point that we should be papering those houses with, you know, invitations and letters that are going to be the most impacted. The problem to not impact them at all, it would be like do no bridge, and that's not an option. So there's going to be some type of impact. I also think the legality issues that Councilor McBride brought up need to be addressed. We shouldn't be like debating like, oh, we're going to go to lawsuit on this. I mean, it should be, whose land is it? If we're going to build a bridge, there's a right of way, and if that is in fact the town's right of way, it needs to be used to do. I mean, we're already compromising by coming down and not meeting the need. The goal is that everybody on that island can get off safely, and it can be used for generations to come. Without no bridge, it's like, you know, Groton Long Point doesn't have, except by boat. So it would be, unless you come through the woods and, you know, up through, right, we can put a, I mean, but we need to have a way to make sure that people can get out in an emergency in their car. And so I think we need to talk about that land that's being talked about. That should be, so my question for John is, so we're sure that that land is the right of way? Like, 'cause I just don't think we should go down this hole and then in 3 years have all these people rise up and say, oh, we can't use that spot, so.
Councilor's time has expired.
Up to this point, our attorneys believe that. I, however, did send the information just to make sure there's nothing new in the packet they provided. You know, anytime we get anything, we want them to look at it, make sure there's nothing that we've missed. So I'll let you know as soon as we get the confirmation back again.
And then just to clarify, did that write-up from the attorney come to us? I may have missed it.
I emailed it out yesterday.
Yesterday, okay, I'll take a look at it, thank you.
Councilor Baumgartner.
Yes, they were flexible delineator posts. So, but a few questions regarding the finance. So if we were to submit an application to the feds through our current process that we're using, the quickest we can build a bridge would be by 2026, or ribbon cutting 2026?
Correct.
And if we were to utilize the 100% reimbursable program, would we still be working within the same timeline, or is it likely it would take maybe a little longer?
No, it's likely it would be the same timeline. I mean, there would be a little bit of a, learning curve at the beginning for a on-call engineering firm, but I think they could get up pretty quickly and then get through basically the same schedule. I went through the schedule with the folks at DOT, and they were confident that they could meet that.
And I apologize if Councilor Bordelon already asked this question. This was regarding if we were to make any additions, say a pier, that would not be reimbursable with the new federal program as well? It would have to be built as part of the bridge, not?
Correct. It'd have to be built as part of the bridge.
Okay. And then my last question is the impacts to the surrounding area. Obviously, it was mentioned, some of the homes, but I'll just speaking for wildlife here. A few months back, I attended a press conference with Manager Burr and our Mayor Melendez. We received federal funding for a resiliency project for Palmer Cove, I think to a tune of about $750,000 to install a living shoreline along just behind the Fisherman Restaurant. We're going to be pulling up asphalt and surface parking and putting in pervious surfacing and, all that good stuff. So
Yeah.
is that, how will the bridge maybe impact that work? And is there any consideration to kind of making it all flow? Because obviously there's going to be a lot of investment in that area and
Sure.
just with a focus on resiliency.
As you saw the bridge.
Hope that's clear.
Well, we did look at actually, real quickly, a 3-span bridge, which is very wide, take away a lot of the causeway, but the cost just got astronomical in that. So the bridge we're proposing is 36 feet wider, so you will get more, flushing of the bay in there, which is, advantageous.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kasiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Hanover, was there a reason why you picked this particular design to show the council today?
This is the design that the task force, this ad hoc task force, had come up with, working with our design engineer, throughout the last year.
Great. So the task force picked it, and it wasn't just randomly picked for this day. This is the one that the task force and.
Correct.
Okay, great, wonderful. And is the Complete Streets policy program done, or are we still working on that?
We have the draft, and we're going through a final review now. And then Councilor Baumgarten will be bringing it to the council in the near future, I'm sure.
I'll do a quick point of it, next meeting.
Oh, great,
Okay.
great. I look forward to
Very
it.
soon then.
So there's no reason why we should already have it, is what I'm asking, because it's a draft at this point, correct?
And also, Complete Streets policy in a nutshell says is you have to account for all modes of transportation, all users of a road, whether it's cars, emergency vehicles, bicyclists, pedestrians, people that have mobility challenges, handicapped people. You have to, design for all these people to use the roadway.
Absolutely. I really look forward to reading that for next week. And Mr. Flynn, I was just a little confused. So your concern about sidewalks is because you want less traffic, so is your concern actually pedestrian traffic?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor McBride.
I just feel like I need to make a point of clarification. I've watched all those videos, and I do not recall the task force recommending this option. I believe it was discussed at great length along with the other options, but I don't think the task force voted or
We
chose
asked for consensus.
consensus.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Bordelon, do you wish to speak again? Is it just a quick question?
It just is, yeah,
Okay.
nothing. Just about the causeway, am I saying it right, the causeway?
Causeway?
During Hurricane Sandy, I knew a lot of that was like, all the sand had gotten pushed and moved. And one of the things from the very first meeting at the town annex, one of the folks that lived down at GLP explained, wanting native plantings along that causeway to help maybe with some of the runoff and erosion. Is that part of the plan in this, to think of some native plantings to help with the sea erosion along that causeway, which also would be a beautification kind of thing along that, when you go to Cape Cod, the grasses and stuff really do help when storm, surges rise and things like that.
Yeah, that can certainly be done. That's something we normally address during like the semifinal or final design phase later on in the project.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
All right. I'm not seeing any other discussion. Thank you for your presentation and explaining the situation. I think he had next steps written there, so that's what we can look forward to. Hold a public informational meeting on preliminary designs in the summer of 2022. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a break, Mr. Mayor?
5-minute break. We'll be back at 8 o'clock.
good.
Recording in progress.
We are back from recess at 8:11. And on to short-term rental ordinance. And we have Director Reiner and Attorney Duggan.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So we're here tonight really to assist the council and address questions that you may have regarding the status of this process and the proposed ordinance that had been addressed previously and gone to public hearing. I think it would be perhaps easiest for us to address questions and try to start somewhere or somewhere in the middle with this, as it's been a long process already. Is that fair?
Yeah.
John?
All right, so, okay, just before our discussion, I sort of want to lay the table for everybody at home. The previous council had done a lot of work on a draft ordinance. So much work, in fact, that it came up to the election time, and they decided that it would be best to leave it to the new council to make the decision on that draft ordinance. So we have that draft ordinance attached here today. We do not need to make a decision on it tonight, but we certainly could. Another thing I would just like to note is this this issue came originally to the council in February 2020, and we had a committee formed, and that committee reported back in November of 2020, and then after that we had various cows that it came public hearing in 2021. So just to let people know, a lot of discussion has been done. A lot of work went into this ordinance, although not necessarily from this council here. All right. Councilor Parker?
I believe it was longer. I know we formed the groups in 2020, but I believe
Right.
it was a lot longer than that because there was several discussions before we got to the point of it forming a group. So I believe it's been at least 3 to 4 years that we've been working on this short-term rentals. So I believe there was ample opportunity for everyone to come out and speak out. Public hearings were involved. The public was involved every step of the way, on both sides, with the city at the one point, working together. So this is 4 years in the making. So either we make a decision or don't make a decision, but we can't keep, I personally feel that we shouldn't be holding things up after 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I made the referral about a month and a half ago to bring this item up for discussion, as we have not discussed it for some time. Thank you again for coming out this evening. I have received no shortage of correspondences from residents, particularly folks who are very concerned about the proliferation of short-term rentals in our community. It goes without saying that, and it is my belief that short-term rentals are making Groton more unaffordable. When you remove homes that are for families where in residential neighborhoods, you are removing families and taxpayers from our community. It's estimated that at least 400 homes right now from Groton through Noank and Mystic are utilized as short-term rentals. We don't, as a town, have an accurate number in large part because they don't have to register with our town. And so, you know, I'm really glad we're having this discussion. My fear with this current ordinance, as it's drafted, is that there really isn't any enforcement mechanisms built into the ordinance. It is my belief that we do have to work in tandem with the planning and zoning. that they, continue to refine the regulations, but we also create parameters through the Court of Ordinances. It is my personal belief that we should not allow homes that are, that are not primary residences. We should be significantly limiting homes in residential neighborhoods that aren't utilized as primary residences for short-term rentals. And I know a lot of people have bought homes, and companies, corporations have bought homes with the intention that they utilize them as investment properties. But my problem is that the more that happens, we're going to, places like Mystic are going to become purely tourist, summer bedroom communities, and they will no longer be neighborhoods. And I cannot in good conscience support or aid and abet destroying our existing neighborhoods that are, financially diverse. When you take normal rental properties out of circulation, you're actually driving people who work in Mystic out of our community. There are folks who are, working at our restaurants who are driving from Rhode Island because they cannot find affordable places to live in Mystic. And so Knowing took a very firm approach of saying, we're not going to have these at all. And, I'm not saying Groton needs to, Groton should be going in that direction, but if we aren't going to have any regulation at all, that is a far better solution than having no regulation whatsoever. So I know my time has expired, but I do have more questions for my second line of speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. As a person who served on the short-term rental committee along with, I believe, it was also Mayor Patrice Ganatowski at the time, my takeaway from that committee was a information gathering committee. Every walk of background on if you were a short-term rental person who had owner-occupied to non-owner-occupied to folks who lived in the town and owned versus maybe someone who lived outside. And so the committee didn't really make a recommendation per se. It was just information gathering and bringing everybody to the table to talk about it, since it was a kind of something that was being tossed around. My concern with it is that it only, again, like the plastic ordinance, only does the town. It doesn't really cover the city, doesn't cover Groton Long Point. So again, we are making these ordinances that only cover a small segment. My question is, who exactly drafted the ordinance? That's my first question.
You were correct about the information gathering. Once that process was done, it was presented to the town council. And then we spent 2 sessions on that. And the town council asked to have the attorneys write one, but they gave parameters of some of what they wanted to see in it. Once we got that draft, then we spent some more time. The council say, I like this, we need to put this in. So, some parameters were given, the attorneys wrote it, and then the council switched it up along the way.
So the attorneys wrote the original draft?
With a lot of parameters for the council of what they wanted to see.
Mm-hmm. And I did provide feedback to the attorneys as they were writing it, but it was written by the town attorneys, and again, taken to the council. We discussed it at a number of meetings and really got into the nitty-gritty of the items that we were changing.
Right, and I think a lot has changed. I mean, it's one thing to say that this has been around for some time. I feel like a lot of new people have taken energy in this since it's come into fruition. When I served on the committee, people that I saw at the last meeting that were not part of any of the other conversations. The Horse and Whitney report that we just got since our last council meeting, that was not part of the public hearing nor of the ordinance writing at the time. So when this was written, we did not have that. So my question is for the town staff, how important do you think that plays into this ordinance?
So the Horsley-Witten memo that has been distributed to the Planning and Zoning Commission and now to the council was looking at some of the options that the town can do and what is allowed via an ordinance versus a zoning regulation. There are many parameters in here of items that the town could address. I think many of those were discussed, if not all of them, or brought up as potential options of things that you could regulate with an ordinance. It all depends on what the council wants to do and how you want to move forward. If you simply want to create a registration system with some parameters of what can and can't happen, or if you want to go into a much more intense type of ordinance and set of restrictions or allowances. Again, we're looking for some direction from all of you.
So I think with that, that should trigger another public hearing of sorts and gathering of information, because we have new documents. Time has passed. Most people haven't been, exactly paying attention to this for the last 3 to 4 years per se. And I think it's important to have that information around the table. We also have a new council. My stance also is I do not feel as a councilor it's my jurisdiction to govern something that should be handled in planning and zoning. Other towns that I've looked and researched, this is covered under planning and zoning. It's a very in-depth process, and I think it should stick with planning and zoning. I also put a referral in to ask that maybe planning and zoning meets on another night. This was brought up under the last council. I brought it up here again, and I officially sent it in a referral, which they did say they received. It's hard to do our business when planning and zoning meets in the same night as us. So I feel that this should be housed at planning and zoning, run by planning and zoning, and collaboration with the council, which we have yet to do. And so until we do that, I feel like our work, it needs to go further. I'm not sure where I stand on it. I definitely think there should be some type of revenue to the town and regulation as far as like registering. But I really can't make that decision as a counselor. I do feel that is a zoning and planning and zoning. I saw some opinions also popped around about the enforcement officer making some recommendations, but they're the enforcement officer. The planning and zoning sets the rule, and the enforcement officer should be enforcing the rule from the planning and zoning. So I say taking this out of planning and zoning really kind of doesn't serve the community if you're for it, if you're against it, if you're for owner-occupied, or if you're for not having corporate companies coming in and take up all the land and
Thank you.
use them.
Councilor's time has expired.
So I think we have more work that we need to do here, and I don't think our full due diligence has been fully vetted. Thank you.
Attorney Duggan.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Councilor Bordelon's comments, one thing I'd like to make clear is that there really is a distinction between what the zoning regulations can do and what you as a body can do through an ordinance. And while we might assume or think that the Planning and Zoning Commission can pretty much do carte blanche what it would like to do in this instance, it really can't. And one of the things that the Horsley-Witten memo, honestly was helpful for me, just in looking at, that doesn't have anything to do specifically with Groton per se, but it lays out the differences between what zoning regulations can do and what a code of ordinances can do. I think that's 2 or 3 pages in. There's a long checklist there, and when you look through them, to me, it's pretty instructive, because it talks about really how, under the ordinance process, the scope of what you can do is so much more than what you can do under the planning and zoning process. And with the planning and zoning process, still at this point, I don't think there's any question when you go back and look at what the definitions are in the zoning regulations. It's clear that these items, the STRs, they're not prohibited under the current zoning regulations. So whatever planning and zoning might do in terms of a regulation, they're going to be dealing with these items as non-conforming uses. They're going to be there. So what we have is those, however many they are, and I think, Andre, you said perhaps, there were 400 or something in town. That's one of the issues that we really don't know. But however many there are of those are going to fall outside of what the planning and zoning folks might do with regard to regulations. And I think that's really important to keep in mind in terms of thinking about what it is that you want to accomplish through this, what you want to have happen, which I think what John was saying, and then that's instructive as to then how to go about it. It may be, depending on what your thoughts are, that maybe it is better for planning and zoning to look at this and address it through a regulation. It may be, however, that if at the outset, and again, we're just at the very beginning of this, at the outset of it, you really might want to get a better understanding in terms of how many of these are there. what are people planning to do with them? How are they planning to use them? What are the parking items? How do they have their parking set up, or what can they accommodate that? And right now, without any of this in place, the town's really not in a position to sort of gauge that, to know, well, how many do we have? And that, in turn, might impact how you're going to look at it going forward in terms of, okay, do we need to just do X, Y, or Z, or does zoning have to do something? But I don't think you're going to find out some of the answers that you really feel you need to know, understandably, and to make really informed choices going forward if you don't have that sort of baseline piece in place. So, yep.
And along those lines, to get a lot of that base information, if this ordinance here, which really is a registration system, if that was adopted as a step one, that would let us get our arms around how big is this issue. So, for example, we spoke with a software company that does monitoring and assists with enforcement on this about a month ago, and it might not be entirely accurate, but they had approximately 276 unique short-term rentals in Groton. That's what they had listed, searching all the online platforms. There's a lot more listings because people will list on multiple platforms, but they found 276 unique listings in all of Groton. That includes the city, that includes Noank, which there are still listings in Noank, that includes Groton, Long Point, and the town. We had asked them to come back to us and give us a number of that, of what just the town is, not including Noank, Groton, Long Point, or the city. I don't have those numbers yet. So that is one piece of it, but also getting that registration system, that would allow us to really get a handle on things. Because, you know, many of these regulations, ordinances, plans that we do, you'll often talk to us, we'll say to you that it is a living, breathing document. We often want to put one foot forward and then the next, putting a toe in the water. And something like this, although might not address everyone's concerns, it's at least one step in the right direction. So that's something to consider.
And to that point, too, it doesn't preclude something else. It certainly doesn't preclude you coming back, whether it's a year later or whatever, saying, you know what, this isn't what we wanted for an ordinance, so we're going to do this. I think perhaps we're both trying to say that we'd like for you to be as well informed as you can be when making some of these decisions.
Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Attorney Duggan. I think you answered the first one. Most of my questions are sort of legal questions. Was the difference between ordinance and a zoning regulation? So we do ordinances from the town council, and the planning and zoning does zoning regulations. So just a simple difference between those.
Sure. So obviously with the zoning regulations are much more limited in scope. And again, as I mentioned a moment ago, because you have so many of these in place already, those will be identified as non-conforming uses, and they'll be outside of some of the other regulations that a zoning entity might be able to put on them. With regard to the ordinances, you have a much broader scope, and it's applicable to everybody, you know, when you're looking at it. And just briefly to comment on I know the Noank issue came up. I could be wrong on this, but my understanding of the Noank issue is that you know, they viewed their zoning regulations as indicating that these didn't fall under them. You know, that these were not within the definition of a dwelling, and that's where, at least for now, I believe that their discussion has ended, and that's their authority in knowing they have a zoning authority. So.
And one other clarification, just so everyone understands, when Attorney Duggan talks about non-conforming or legal non-conforming, a lot of people are also familiar with the term grandfathered. So that if the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted a new zoning regulation saying we're prohibiting short-term rentals everywhere in the town of Groton, there would still be approximately 276, well, minus what's not in Groton, Long Point, Noank, the city, legal non-conforming or grandfathered short-term rentals throughout town. The council would then still have to, if you wanted to go above and beyond a registration system, which is not allowed, something that we could do through zoning, you would still have to adopt an ordinance seeking a registration system.
One of the questions that came up a lot in the public hearings was, you hear people saying that the short-term rentals weren't mentioned in the zoning regulations. Is this the document that they were talking about? I just want to make sure, because I read this one today, I just want to make sure I'm reading the right. And you're right, there's nothing in this document that says anything about short-term rentals.
That I don't think is surprising necessarily. If you look under what the dwelling unit is,
Right.
it's encompassed
So
within that.
one of the comments that came in the public hearings was that because something wasn't mentioned in this, the position they took that it wasn't mentioned in this is that they said, well, then you can't do it. And my experience from doing agreements and licensing deals and over the course of my career was my lawyers always told me, if it's not mentioned in your agreement, then you can do it. So can you just kind of give us a little bit about how laws work in terms of when something's in agreement, when it isn't in agreement, and what you can do and you can't do?
Sure. I mean, in part, I think that the language is broader than perhaps you're describing it to be. And so, we might not say, a bus is a vehicle, but a vehicle includes a bus, right? So here, it talks about dwelling unit is defined as a room or group of connected rooms that include a bathroom and facilities for living, sleeping, cooking, and eating that are arranged, designed, or intended to be used as living quarters for one household, whether owner-occupied, rented, or leased. So it specifically has those additional words in there, rented or leased, and I think it's be very difficult to get around that definition and to suggest that a short-term rental is not included in that. We don't have to say it right out, but it's incorporated within that.
Another question that came up from all the public hearings is a lot of people want to just sort of ban short-term rentals out completely. Can you just, and it's hard to sort of look into the future, but what would be the legal ramifications of doing a ban? Does that put the town at a big risk for all the people that own these things and suing, or just your opinion on?
Sure, I think there are a couple of aspects to that, and John, you can feel free to jump in as well. I mean, I think John described that on the zoning side. If the zoning commission or planning zoning commission goes ahead and bans this, they don't have the authority, to ban those that are already grandfathered in. Now, on the town side, with regard to an ordinance, kind of a whole other battle, frankly. I mean, there's enough, I think, litigation out there across the country regarding these things, and I don't think you can necessarily say, oh, the town can just go ahead and say, we're banning them, and wipe out whatever interest in property people might have, et cetera. I think it's unsettled, so I wouldn't want to say to you that absolutely the town could do this through an ordinance. I think there would be issues related to that.
Do you think those same issues would come up if we put a cap, if we said, as of now, there are no more, we'll leave everybody that's, like basically the grandfathering clause, that, as of a certain date, we said, okay, no more.
Right.
We're going to have those same issues that are going to arise.
I'd have to think about where that could come from, but if it comes from, planning and zoning, I don't think there would be an issue. I think it's within their prerogative to do that. But you would still have, as John was saying, that the fact that you have 200 plus unregulated entities out there.
I mean, my concern is a little bit that it turns into a taxi medallion kind of situation where you have haves and have-nots, and now there are certain people that have this, and then the issue is, can you sell that? If you own a short-term rental and you want to sell it, what does that do to the next owner? And it seems to be just become a mess very quickly.
And with that sort of issue, with zoning regulations, things run with the land, so, that those rights would
They'd carry on, they would keep on going.
It would carry with the property,
carry with the
not
property.
be like, individual transferable quotas with fishing rights that you can then just sell that right to somebody else and they can use it anywhere in that fishery.
So those pieces of property have a certain value and become maybe an increased value because they're income-generating properties that you've just sort of created this whole 270 or whatever the number is of these units. So, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kasiri.
So my first question is about the actual enforcement of the ordinance as it's written. Who would actually do the enforcement?
I think the way that we wrote this initially would be our code enforcement officer would be the one enforcing this, but we also did kind of put it on everyone's radar that depending on the level of enforcement that goes along with this, we might need another part-time or full-time staff person.
That police might be empowered to some level also.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Police would be involved also.
Yeah, for, if we were looking at purely daytime enforcement, yes, our existing code enforcement officer could do some of the work, but I think this would add probably a substantial amount of additional work to his plate and could require additional staff. If we started diving into this and realized we want to have people after hours, like some places, like I know Newport, Rhode Island has multiple staff, some that work nights and weekends, that their job is focused solely on things along these lines.
Okay, I was just curious because I saw that it's a mail fine, and from a law enforcement perspective, that wouldn't normally be the issue if law enforcement was doing that. So my other concern about the ordinance as it's written is, are we opening up the town to any litigation? And I'm specifically looking at the language asking for off-street parking and garbage cans having to be hidden because we're treating certain property owners differently than other property owners, and I just was curious about where that leaves us with potential litigation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question. I can't cite to you right now, oh, this case says this is okay. But I think as structured, it's all part of a program where treating people differently, well, they are in a slightly different category if they're choosing to run this, to run this operation. But I don't see the issues of saying, you need to be sure that the garbage cans are put away and requiring that they ensure that the people they rent to take care of that. It's still their obligation.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burt, I know Councilor Franco had asked during one of our last meetings about police stats. Oh, sorry. Did you happen to ask the chief if there's any kind of statistics?
I did, because we don't have any kind of real list of them. They don't know what's a SDR or what's not, so it's not information that they have available. I mean, once in a while they figure it out where they're out there, but no, there's not a report they can run. Just a question on the registration. Isn't the off-street thing just that you have to tell you? It's not a real requirement, right? It's just more mark where you have any.
You have to show the location of off-street parking and also the location of trash receptacles not be stored within public view except within proper containers for the purpose of collection. So I think it's saying not just having garbage bags sitting out on the curb.
Okay, but would they be eligible to be fined if they were not compliant?
Yes, so those are within Section 4, the standards, and then Section 5, the penalties, get into people that are not falling within, anyone who fails to perform any act or duty required by this ordinance is subject to a fine.
Okay. Mr. Renner, what did the Greater Groton survey reveal about short-term rentals?
Great question. So, one, that people are very polarized on this issue. And I don't have the numbers with me right now, but one of the things we saw, we were rerunning a report because we had done one initial survey on just kind of 4 or 5 basic questions, and what we had seen now is, I want to say there were somewhere around, I don't have the exact numbers, maybe 1,500 to 1,600 survey marks, yet that was only from about 650 individual IP addresses. So there are multiple people clicking more than once and retaking the survey. So we put a second survey out there, which will wrap up. So we have a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on this topic, as well as with data centers and cannabis for Thursday. We have that survey open. We were going to compile the data on that prior to Thursday's meeting, and that had some much more deeper dive questions in there. The last I checked, I think we were around 150 respondents, but for that, people have to register their name, I believe, and an email address to take the survey.
Okay, great. And I just wanted to clarify about this Horsley-Witten memo. It really is, instead of more of a report, it's more options for us, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that the Horsley-Witten memo options were probably some of the things that you've already looked at, discussed, weighed upon throughout the 4 years that this has been explored?
Correct. And, one of the reasons we brought Horsley Witten on to assist with this is, one, they've helped us with zoning regulations in the past. They do a really great job on that, but also we're short-staffed right now. So we needed someone to take a deep dive into this so we can keep doing the things we are doing while we're short 2 planners right now.
Right, understand. And is there anything jumping out at you from this memo that you didn't explore within the past 4 years?
Nothing that really comes to mind. I think we were aware of the number of things we could do. We didn't put it into as pretty of a memo, and I really like that table 2 that Attorney Duggan had referenced of the issues of what can be done within a zoning regulation versus a code of ordinance. We really hadn't broken it down like that, but these are all issues that we were aware we could or could not regulate through zoning or through a code of ordinance change.
Great, so none of this content is really new.
No, no.
And just to piggyback off of what Councilor Jones was asking you, Attorney Duggan, could a cap through the town council potentially create litigation issues? Because that would be granting certain residents an option and certain residents not.
Right, I would have some concerns with that, just like a concern about the outright ban after, and I think that could lead to litigation. I can't give you a direct answer that it would be fine or wouldn't be fine, but I would have concerns.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Councilor Franco?
Thank you. I thought I recalled when we went through this ordinance in great detail, like we went section by section through it. And I thought I recalled that there was an additional local 3% tax added to this. I don't see that in there this time unless I am missing it. And that's something that through their, Airbnb or whatever, they just add that into as a local STR tax. And Airbnb would actually pay the town directly.
Yeah, I don't think it ever made it into an actual draft. I remember that coming up, but I don't think it was in one, because I've got all our versions of the drafts, so I didn't find one with it.
And I thought we had spelled out there was a registration fee for registering.
The registration fee is referenced, but I didn't see the specific amount. So it's referenced that on page 2,
I think we were
paragraph
doing that so
sub-F.
you could change it while going through the ordinance.
Yeah.
We have some
right.
We have
Sorry.
some fees you can set on our own by council.
Yeah.
And some that, once it's in the ordinance, it's in the ordinance. You have to go through the long process to change it. So the council said they wanted a little more freedom to make that change.
So we
And
said
that
there would
is
be a
there
fee,
under F.
and that could be changed easily with just a
Yeah.
vote instead of having to go through a whole process of an ordinance change. Is that
Correct. In section 3 under registration, letter F, the fee shall be established by resolution of the town council from time to time. So that's
Okay.
something you could do at any point in time and not have to go through the process of changing an ordinance.
I also recall last time that there was an issue with off-street parking, and I understood your description and your explanation. And I will bring it up again. New London, I believe, did not do anything with off-street parking because New London found that to be something that illegal that they could not enforce. Because I don't know how you can, I can't see our town police ever enforcing, because you're staying at a short-term rental and you parked on the street, that they're gonna give you a ticket for it. I mean, we're all allowed to park on the street as long as you're registered and insured and things of that nature. So that just brings something to my attention that, again, and I brought it up last time, and I'll bring it up this time, I cannot, but I understand what you're saying, that if they do have a short-term rental, they at least have to have the parking for it, and not that it would be enforced if they did park on the street. Is that correct? But they would at least have to have the parking for it.
They would have to show us on a plan when they register that they do have options for off-street,
Right, you're off-street.
off-street parking.
It doesn't change their, what's available to them versus any other member of the public. It's just, making sure there is some sort of parking in the area.
Right, and when you build a house, they normally have it where you have to have parking on your property.
Correct.
Okay. So, reviewing the penalty amounts, I think, and that's on our, I guess it's page 3, our page 30. It starts off with, the first is a warning, the second offense is $100, the third is $250, and then the fourth is $500. If you look at the cost of it as short-term rental to stay one night, I would think at the minimum, it's usually at around $200. And I don't think these numbers are really in line with any kind of real penalty that anybody will take to very
You could
seriously.
do it every day. 4 days in a row, you could be issuing these things, get to the 500, and then every day it's 500.
Right, and I do recall, at the time, it was Councilor Melendez had brought up, what is a 12-month period? Does it reset every January, or is it a rolling? So if you get your first offense, just say in August, does the 12-month period go from August to August, or does it reset come January? That was, I believe, a topic that I don't remember us coming up with a solution to.
I think this is, a fourth and subsequent offense within a 12-month period. So I think it would be looking at, and again, I'd confer with the town attorney.
Basically starts at your first offense.
Yes, from your first offense to
So
12
like
months.
if it's
from now.
August.
And it would keep resetting after each offense, I would think, too.
Okay, so let's just say you got to a max out, and your maximum penalty, and me personally, I think you should stay at the maxed out penalty until you're clear with no penalties for maybe a year.
Well, I do think that, so if your first offense was April 1st, for the until the next April 1st, any offenses you have would start building upon that one.
Okay. So they're not gonna say, well, wait, my offense was in August, my second offense was in September, you start counting in August.
No.
It resets the clock again in September, you're saying?
If they occur within that 12-month period.
And-
At any 12 months, were there that many?
And I think we can, that's one aspect of the ordinance I think we can clarify, without having it be, an issue, just to clarify from where that runs.
That is something I would like to just at least just clarify that one issue. And can we increase the penalties without having to go back to public hearing?
This will be wishy-washy. I'll warn you ahead of time that while you might be able to change some of the penalties if it's a very small amount, I would be concerned if we were talking about going to like $1,000 penalty or something like that. I think, whether it's these amounts or different amount or slightly different amount, I guess I'm still looking at this as we're talking about it as saying, okay, this is the first step in, I don't know, maybe you won't have many violators. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out that you have violators all the time, and you'll be looking at this in a whole different light, because now you'll know how many are out there, who's registered. Okay, how problematic is it really? You'll have more data to deal with. But I think if you're talking about, even like doubling the amounts, or again, I had this $1,000 figure in my head, that I think is significant enough that you would be going back and talking to folks about it.
Would it be prudent to actually take out the dollar amounts and have a vote of the council like we did for the registration?
Can that be done? I think it can be done,
Or would it necessitate another public hearing?
because we're changing it to that too, and leaving it open-ended, I guess. Yeah, I think that's a fair point, John.
Okay,
That we'd probably be there in either case.
okay. And if we wanted to add an additional 3% tax, we'd have to go back to public hearing. Hearing, is that what you're saying?
I think
I
that's,
honestly think, I do recall us agreeing on a 3% tax for local tax on this. I really do.
I don't recall that, if that was done, I
I can tell
believe.
you, this is what went to public hearing though, so it wasn't at the public hearing.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I've talked to a lot of people on both sides of the issue. I sort of put them in two categories, like the banning category and the regulating category, because I found that nobody thinks we should do nothing, which I think is encouraging, that everyone thinks that there should be something done. But I want to learn more about the banning side. I know that with planning and zoning, they'll be grandfathered in. So regardless of what planning and zoning does, these are going to exist in Groton. And you explained the trying to ban from town council side, how that can open us up to lawsuits. But I want to, like, because there wasn't just outright ban. There was people saying, well, I want to ban just anyone who's not owner occupied, or I want to ban, you have to live in the town. You can have a short-term rental in town only if you live in town. I'm trying to remember basically, I want to know all these situational bans where it's not an outright ban, but it's situational. Is that sort of similar than an outright ban where you have people who will that still get us into a lawsuit, is basically what my question is.
I don't have the direct answer for you. I can say again that would raise, I think, some concerns if we start getting into, is it owner occupied, is it owned by a corporation, et cetera. I think, again, in part, I don't think any of us know what's really out there right now. And one of the things that was included in the draft ordinance and the registration process was, okay, you have to list the owner, but we also need a person who's a contact to hopefully, and I think that the desire there in part was to alleviate some of the concerns, as well as to ensure that if there is an issue, we can address it quickly. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, John. I wouldn't want to say to you, yes, we could narrow it in this way, but not this way, that way, but not this way, right away.
I would imagine it might be a difference too between existing versus new. Taking is a zoning term, but I imagine the concern is something similar with your homes are worth so much as revenue generating, you're reducing the values, and that's where it's, so I imagine there might be a difference between existing versus regulations for incoming new ones.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say that possibly. I think that's possibly the case, but I can't. It's not going to be something that's just smooth sailing, is what I think.
Yeah, and for that reason, honestly, like I think it's too much of a gray area that I actually don't think it's wise to sort of put the town in that situation where we're trying to ban short-term rentals, just because I'm not confident that the town could win a case, and there's obviously a lot of interested parties, and it could be like a class action lawsuit type of thing, and I really just don't think that that's honestly a direction that the town should go, even though there's many people who spoke quite passionately about that direction. So if there's going to be, regardless of if we do the ban or if we do not do the ban, and personally I don't think we should, there's going to be short-term rentals in Groton. And I think if there are going to be short-term rentals in Groton, regardless of what we do, regardless of what planning and zoning does, I think that there needs to be some registry of what's out there. The manager talked about how the police, when they get complaints, they don't even know if it's a short-term rental complaint or not. So we don't even know how many complaints these would be. So this would fix that problem. The other thing is just knowing how many are out there. I think that will inform us on what to do in the future. This is sort of a first step. I don't think we have enough information in order to make an informed decision on what to do, and I think that this ordinance would give us the information we need in order to figure out actually how to solve this problem. All right. Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. Thank you. I kind of feel like, we had options here 1 through 6, and for me, I think July 12th meeting and July 14th meeting need to play out before making any decisions. I mean, we're still waiting on certain things to come back that haven't happened. I think we do need to have a joint meeting with planning and zoning. I think that we should be working in conjunction and not separate. It should be kind of a parallel thing, not let's write some ordinance that was written by the town and then the council was asked to tweak it in a meeting. But it was also during an election season, it was kind of pushed in at the very end, and people have lost sight of it, and it needs to come back up. This council has not even reviewed it other than it being part of the agenda for the first time today, and hearing people want enforcement or no enforcement. We really haven't worked through it, and then there's suggestions being made that people would like to put in, but we can't put them in without going back to a public hearing. And so I feel like we need another public hearing and a chance to really kind of see where this sits. I think we should be working collaboratively with the planning and zoning. So my question is what types of changes need to happen, and how can we get to the point where we get down and have that meeting? That's my first, with planning and zoning. Because this is primarily written by town staff, and then council kind of tweaked it in a meeting. But like, we really haven't vetted this fully. There's a lot of things, even looking at this
Point of order.
From a year ago.
What's your point of order?
Motivation about who vetted what properly.
Okay.
I will say the council gave more input than we did, so just, it's not.
Right, and only certain people got to speak, and you get 2 turns, and that's not really good deliberation. So I don't feel like my best effort is done on this document, and I even served on the short-term committee. I do think some form of regulation happens, but it doesn't mean we need to jump and put the first thing that runs in front of us and put it forward. I think we should give it a little bit of time here and go through the document. So my question, how do we meet with planning and zoning to try to kind of collaborate?
Council can invite them to a meeting, or the mayor will see the chair of the planning commission soon. I mean, it's all up to how the council wants to do anything.
Right, and it goes back to my whole thing. It's hard to have them come to a council meeting because they meet on the same night. So we never can work collaboratively. We're always working on the back end. So the council's creating ordinances or making decisions without the planning and zoning. A lot of the decisions that have happened in the town that we've had to go back at were directly a result of council's decision and then planning and zoning's review. Why do we not bring them around the table now and have that discussion? So that's what I would encourage. I don't care which end you stand on. The end result will be the end result. I just think we need to do the work with collaboration of the P&Z and really define and go through the document in its entirety. My other question is, looking at this, I mean, yeah, the fees, as was stated from years ago, aren't even sufficient. The document's not very clear on certain items. Has planning and zoning even reviewed this? Do we know?
Planning and zoning has received a copy of this ordinance.
Right. And have they directly sent any statements?
Not that I'm aware of.
Have we asked?
I don't believe the council directly asked for input on this. That was last October. I can't recall if the council did.
Yeah, I had asked about planning and zoning and where this would fit in with that. So, again, I'm having trouble not with the concept of the idea. I'm just worried about a document that's not going to do us much justice, where we're going to be dancing around it later possibly, and I think we really should have the meeting. So my recommendation would be the one, which was provided here: schedule a joint meeting between the P&Z and the town council and report back, which also would trigger maybe a public hearing and let the July 12th meeting and the July 4th meeting and bring those notes back to the table and collaborate. I think this council needs to have a working session where we go over it line by line again and look at ways that we can alter it. And if it triggers a public hearing, that's okay. I think everyone around here should have a chance to review this, and more public outreach to the community to get involved. Thank you.
Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, just to be clear, for the council's sake, there are 6 options. So I would be in favor of one, which would schedule a joint meeting between the PZC and the town council and report back. 2, begin work on a new draft ordinance, and 5, provide staff with direction on the topic or an additional alternative, the additional alternative being that planning and zoning does their due diligence on the regulation as well, so kind of doing a dual track. But again, you know, I think there's a huge distinction between, you know, an out-of-state owner of multiple, you know, STRs and, you know, Susan or Jim who lives in their home in Mystic for, you know, 9 to 11 months in the, you know, in the year, and renting their primary residence to be able to, you know, both, you know, on fixed incomes and utilizing that income to pay their taxes or to supplement their limited income. So, you know, they are invested in their community. They're on the ground, and so I just think we really should distinguish it. There are communities across the country, Denver, you know, Hartford here in our state, Newport, as you mentioned, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., that have, I think, a lot of great, you know, have really great regulations and ordinances on the books that do address STRs that I think everybody should review as well. So on, just quickly, if you go to page 33, there's kind of options we have. I would say, you know, we have to define and allow STRs with conditions in the zoning regulations and develop an STR ordinance as in the Code of Ordinances to regulate what zoning cannot. In terms of enforcement, John, could you go over the Horsley-Witten report? I think it's the 4th page, so page 38. Could you go over that real quick?
Sure. In the Horsley-Witten memo, there's a table 2, issues related to STRs, regulation of short-term rentals. And really, this kind of breaks out what can be regulated in zoning regulations versus the Code of Ordinances. And I think one of the interesting things of this whole chart is the only item that cannot be regulated in a Code of Ordinances is the imposition of a special use permit, allowing for scrutiny of the particular facts of a site before allowing such a use. That's something that could be done through zoning. All of these other, I guess, topic issues, whether it's registration, publicizing or identifying a local contact, residency requirements, off-street parking, noise, nuisance, garbage, regulation of prohibition of pets, spacing requirements between short-term rentals, caps, occupancy limits, visitor limits, proof of code compliance, requirements for notification of neighbors, limitations on turnover, limitations on areas where short-term rentals are allowed or not allowed, imposition of a penalty or fines. All of those can be addressed through a Code of Ordinances.
Excellent.
That would not have necessarily grandfathering implications with it.
So, you know, as you mentioned, really planning and zoning would have the expertise regarding the land use. We would have the expertise regarding the kind of public policy, if you will. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Now, you mentioned Granicus. You know, they do enforce or regulate STRs, or the enforcement for STRs in communities throughout our country. I understand that we utilize the company for the Bang the Table platform. Could they hypothetically provide the enforcement? As was mentioned, you know, in reality, does our police department have the bandwidth or capacity to enforce, you know, STR regs, or, you know, planning and zoning? You're already spread thin. The police have, I think, much bigger fish to fry right now. So
ideally, we would love to use Granicus all the way.
Or another, there's a number of competitors with them. Yeah. You know, and one of the things that they have documents and background information about best practices in regulating short-term rentals, but also recognize that they also make money from regulating short-term rentals. So as we take advice and guidance from any of these agencies, recognizing that if we utilized a company like Granicus or there are a couple other major companies, they charge, I think it's $100 to $200, depending on the level of services today, to do that address, kind of compliance, monitoring, checking up on things, taking a first run through a complaint type system. But, so just be aware of that also. There is a cost associated with it.
So just quickly, I would agree, we should contract out an enforcement and, zoning compliance. In terms of STRs being permitted in commercial, I think that's fine, but again, the devil's in the detail in terms of residential. And then lastly, and I'm 5 seconds over, but, if we can, Councilor Franco mentioned going through a public comment period, and I know if we were to go in the direction of a new ordinance, we'd likely go through a new public comment period, which I think is important. I've learned a lot more on the issue than even when we first, got that draft, well over a year ago. So thank you again, and look forward to being part of this process.
Councilor Franco?
Thank you. I think it is the town council's role to take a lead on this. We have heard from many people in our community, and I think this is this ordinance. It's not everything I wanted. We went around and had major discussion on this, and it was a collaboration of majority of the council, what they picked. There were things that I would like to see different in it as well, but this was a collaborative effort from the council. I think it's a very good first start, and as it was stated, we can revisit this in the future, just as though we're revisiting other ordinances, like our ethics ordinance. We start somewhere, and then we can tweak it if necessary. And I think if we want to know what planning and zoning is saying about this, then we should watch their meetings, because they have said plenty about, I think, some of this topic, and also about the council. And they've made, I personally believe they've made themselves very clear on what they think of the council and what the council has done on this. On that page 38, table 2, there are 17 items here, and it's basically what can zoning do, what can we do as a code of ordinance. Out of this ordinance, we can do 16 items. And in this ordinance, we have 7 of them in there, and that I think is a good start at least. Out of everything the zoning can do, there's 5 things they can do. So if we collaborate with them, I don't see what we're collaborating on. They can do something with off-street parking. Well, so can we. Noise and nuisance, they can do something on that. So can we. They can do something on imposition of penalty schedules and fines for violations. Well, so can we. Limitation on areas where short-term rentals are allowed or not regulated. We can do that as well. So the only thing that can't be done, which was just notated, was the special use permit issue. So I think, as it's been stated, it's been 4 years. I honestly wish we had just voted on this during, when we had worked on this so hard before. And with that, I'm going to make a motion to put the ordinance on the floor for a vote tonight, and as a first step of bringing something to our community as written. I so move.
Second, Kasiri.
I got a motion for alternative 3, moved by Franco and seconded by Kasiri. Councilor Kasiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to first acknowledge that there are people who feel very strongly on this issue, whether it be that they want to ban short-term rentals completely or that they want STRs completely unregulated and feel that we should stay out of it. But I also want to state that there are plenty of people who fall on a wide spectrum of opinions in between. And as with anything else, this issue doesn't have to be black or white. Our packet outlines several different options, including doing nothing, and then there are various other options of regulation. It also lays out a vast array of pros and cons of short-term rentals. I think we have heard many of the pros and cons through our written communications and our public comments here at our town council meetings. So in debating about this topic, I want to stick to what I always do, which is the facts. At our last council meeting, we had a significant amount of people come before us and speak to the various positive aspects of owning short-term rentals. There are alternative income revenues for Groton taxpayers. There are many residents who have rehabbed abandoned and blighted properties in our town to run an STR. There's a group of STR owners that have established their own business association that is ensuring that their STRs are not a nuisance to their neighbors. I empathize with families that are trying to seek alternative ways to feed their families and keep their homes in a tough economy. We've also had various members of our town come before us and express concern about the nuisances of STRs. They are concerned of noise, community character, unknown neighbors, litter, and parking issues. I understand the thought process behind wanting to ensure that Groton continues to be a community of neighbors. But without some type of registration process, all we have right now is data from a website that residents are stating isn't entirely accurate. AirDNA could register one STR as 3 or 4 based off an algorithm, and I certainly don't know how often this website is updated or if it's purged of old STRs that are no longer operating as STRs. And town staff is stating that there's a guesstimate of how many STRs are here in Groton. There's also a lot of debate about owner-occupied versus LLCs. I think this issue is also much more complicated than a strictly black or white issue. We have many STRs that are not considered owner-occupied because they're owned by people who do live in our community but just are at a different address. LLCs are also not necessarily owned by New York-based billionaires, as some are suggesting. And what I have discovered from my learning about this whole process is that a regular person can obtain an LLC to rent a property to protect their assets. So this is a complicated matter with many different strong opinions and emotions on both sides. As a town councilor, it is my job again to understand my role. I think the public has made it very apparent that they want something done. And I want to also acknowledge that I think that this is another one of those issues like the data center that councilors need to step back and say, what is our role as a councilor? What is planning and zoning's role? We need to be very careful about influencing the other body as our roles are separate. Sometimes we deal with the same issues, but again, our roles are what we should consider. As a legislative body, I think we should focus on identifying STRs in our community. We have very little information about how many they actually are and how many are owned by people who already reside in our community and what the actual percentage of out-of-state based STRs there really are in Groton. I think the other big issue that we have heard about is not having a key holder to be able to address the issues with. Having a registration process to identify the short-term rentals and then be able to have contact information and a response time is an adequate first step. If there is a problem property, as many fear, this ordinance has punitive consequences for excessive noise complaints or party houses. I am very hesitant to outright ban short-term rentals because of litigation, but also we don't really have a statistical knowledge of how many there really are, who owns them, and without attempting to do a softer approach to regulation without actual facts. I also understand there are plenty of residents who are relying on these properties to keep their homes, to make an extra income, and to feed their families. As a town councilor, I think it is important to best represent my constituents so that as many people feel seen, heard, and respected as possible. Again, I acknowledge that there are many people on a wide array of spectrum of opinions on these issues, and I think this ordinance best addresses concerns, will give us more information, and in the future, if something needs to be changed, the town council can look at it again. I'd also like to make an amendment.
What's your amendment?
I would like to adopt the ordinance as written, but striking the requirements to store trash receptacles out of view and requiring off-street parking.
Okay. Where is this?
The trash receptacles is in section 4, section A, subsection 4. And then
So you want that just taken out?
Yeah, anything identifying that the trash receptacles need to be hidden.
Okay.
And then off-street parking is in section 3, registration, subsection B, subsection 5.
Is there a second?
Second, Jones.
Okay. Moved by Kasiri, seconded by Jones. 2 amendments. Okay.
May I speak to the amendment
Yes.
real quick? I am concerned about treating different property owners in different ways, and I just want to make sure that we are not setting ourselves up for litigation. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Baumgartner?
Yes, I'm vehemently opposed to passing any ordinance, especially or I should back that up, vehemently opposed to passing an ordinance that we had drafted well over a year ago that was vetted by a council that most of whom aren't a part of this current body. So I would highly caution our council from moving forward with this, especially since since this ordinance was already drafted, it wouldn't necessitate a regular first-time public hearing, going through our regular process that we go through to pass ordinances. We heard from a lot of folks at our last public comment period, in the comment period from a month ago on both sides. And well, we've already had a working group that have talked about these issues. There are many members of that original working group that have cautioned this council about moving forward with this ordinance. And we would only know that if we had the experience of having served on this council and the previous council. So I would highly implore all the new members to continue having conversations with those stakeholders, because they were the stakeholders that had studied this issue, because of the ad hoc committee that was set up by Mayor Granatowski. And so they did good work, but this ordinance is not reflective of that work. And I mean that with great respect, but we are really putting the cart before the horse if we're looking to move forward with this ordinance. This ordinance has no enforcement mechanisms. So to the proponent of these, I would ask the proponents of this ordinance, where specifically is the enforcement? I would agree, the fines are not high enough, and I think that was a point that Councilor Franco made. We need to review that. That if we pass this ordinance as written, we won't be addressing those issues. The issues of primary residence, it absolutely matters. There is a big difference between short-term rentals that are primary residences and short-term rentals where no one is domiciled in the home year-round. We are losing our community to these interests, and I understand people have made investments, but they made speculative investments in these homes because of the fact that Mystic has boomed into becoming a summer spot, and that's great. Restaurants, we are certainly doing well because of it, but we cannot lose our neighborhoods to STRs completely. So I would really, really suggest our council just forgo any action on this, and especially since if we do move forward with an ordinance this evening, we will not have the normal feedback that we would get through the public hearing process, and my time has expired, and I want to be respectful of that. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. Yeah, I share some of the same concerns with Councilor Baumgartner. It's not that I don't think, along with what Councilor Cassieri stated, as I served on that committee, absolutely it's important to listen to the citizens and have something in place. But I feel that we would not be doing the community any service by putting something forward just because we wrote it a year ago, just because we should send something forward. Just sending something forward just to do something doesn't make it the right item to send forward at the right time. A lot has changed in a year and a half, and I think this document could be a stronger document when we really sit down and gather more information. Looking at this chart, Horst and Whitley are just one company that analyzed this. We don't even have a comparison of another company. They might have a different conclusion of what could be done. So this is one opinion, which was not part of the draft when it was drafted. We didn't have that opinion. We didn't have some of the people that came around and spoke before. also, a lot's changed in the community. Mystic has grown wonderfully during COVID, which has been great for the storefronts and all of that. So there's some different things that we need to look at. We're currently working on a parking situation in Mystic. There's so many different avenues. I think this is like a base. My concern is that we put something forward and we're always revisiting these ordinances because we're not writing something that has teeth in it that can stick for a little while. Why not send our best document forward and get on to new business versus revisiting all these ordinances to amend here and there and then getting people upset by them? Let's have a public hearing. Let's take this Horse and Whitney thing. And on that chart, one of the other things, there was a lot of things that it states that we can do versus what the planning and zoning can do. But one of the key things that states that we both can do is limitations on areas where short-term rentals are not allowed or not regulated. That's a joint thing. And that's that planning zoning piece that we need to have. So I just caution that. So I'm going to make a motion for option 1, which was stated in here to schedule a joint meeting between planning and zoning and town council to report back. Our planning and zoning is a big part of this piece, so that would be my motion.
I'll second the motion.
And then if I could speak to the motion?
Sure.
That I think it's really important to bring them around the table. I think we have seen in other things that have come before us, legal documents. We even had, the Branford Manor document with tax abatements, other documents that we've done, we haven't done our full due diligence on. Let's do it on this one, and let's bring forward, as a council unified, the strongest document that we can bring forward. And that will represent the council well, and we have a chance to do that. Just saying it's been sitting here for a year, and now's the time to act, that's not a reason. The reason would be it's a time to act and gather more information because more people have started to come out. There were new people present that weren't present before. New information has come out that was not privy before. There's things in here now that I would not agree with from a year ago that are in here. So I encourage the council to slow down. Let's write something really great that we all can stand behind. That's going to be, great for all avenues. I agree with the mayor that there needs to be some form of regulation, and where that's going to sit is to be determined. But let's propel that forward. Let's generate those ideas and discussion as a council, as a new council. So that would be my recommendation. Allow the 12th and the 14th to play out. More information will come out of that, and let's see what more people come forward. Also, adding a public hearing also as well, because there's recommendations tonight of things that people wanted to change that they are just saying we can't change because we can't have a public hearing. So we're just going to move this document. But people up here spoke about some changes they wanted, and they're willing to pass those changes to not generate a public hearing. I don't know why. We should have a public hearing.
Point of order.
So that's my recommendation.
Motivation of why people are speaking and saying what they're saying.
I ask the councilors don't speak to the motivations of other councilors.
So my motivation would be that we need a public hearing so we can allow for people to speak. And I wouldn't want to block that. So if I see a change that's going to happen here, that's going to generate a public hearing, then that is the need and the will of the people that need to be around here. There's probably more in this document. I just hate to send something forward that has to be corrected 5 to 6 times over the next year. And it's going to go back and forth. And it's going to take up all of our time. Let's gather, let's create something really strong and move it forward. I think we all have great ideas on this. And I think this is a diving board document, but it's definitely not in its final state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to set the table here.
Bang the table.
I've got a motion for alternative 1, moved by Councilor Bordelon. That's what would be voted on first. Second would be, and this is not ending discussion, I'm just letting people know what's on the floor. Second is an amended motion by Councilor Kasiri, which is the draft ordinance, and she took out two of these sub-bullets, and then I have the main motion by Councilor Franco, which is alternative 3, which is the ordinance unamended. Councilor McBride.
Thank you. I'm struggling with this because I'm wondering why we can't go down both paths. We're hearing from John Reiner that we need this information to make better, more informed decisions. So why can't this council approve this motion tonight? I'm sorry. So I'm confused as to why we can't go down both parallel paths. John Reiner is indicating that we need this information to make better informed decisions, and I think that's very accurate. And I think Mayor Melendez, one of the things you commented on was whether or not, we can make a certain cap. But if this council or whoever decides to stress certain things based on census tracts, if we find out Census Tract 730, which is Mystic, has 42 short-term rentals from this study, we can then set that as a cap to limit future, if that's what's determined, to limit future ones. So I think time is of the essence to move forward if we want to try to limit short-term rentals. So I'm leaning more towards moving forward with this. And another question I have is, if we approve this tonight, it's not really approved tonight. It's got to go to the council. What date? The first date of August. So even if we approve this, we could make changes. Or if we get more information from the information that you're proposing on the 12th and 14th, we can vote it down on the first Tuesday in August. So I would be in favor of moving this forward. But I'm also in favor of what you're both indicating, to have more information, because I do think we need more meetings, and not just with PCNC, but also with the EDC, because I think they should be involved in this matter. So I don't know why we need to just have one motion. Why can't we have two motions to move this forward as is to the council for the first weekend of August, but also have the mayor call a meeting with P&Z and the EDC to move this forward and get more information? I don't see why we can't do both. So I'm in favor of the ordinance. I think we need data. We need better information. It starts the process. It seems like a lot of work was done the past couple of years by previous councilors, and I think we may need to make some amendments and make some changes, but the community has spoken, and we need to move forward, and the first way to do that is with, I think, starting tonight with the registration process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Westervelt?
Nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Kasiri?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wouldn't this have to go to public hearing with my amendment?
It may have to go to public hearing with that amendment. I would say with the amendment, just for clarity purpose, in rereading the sections that talk about these, they talk about the fact that the following information shall be made available by at the STR by the owner and provided to the renter. It's not saying, I think as you look at it, it's not saying you have to park here, you have to do this. It's saying that the information has to be transmitted. So just for clarity on that point, I think the concern, as you raised it before, about perhaps treating people potentially differently, I don't think that that's what this actually says, at least is written here, saying that you just need to provide the information.
I think it's really more directing the owner to tell the renter, here are the places you can park, and here's where the trash bins are.
Okay, because I had asked before if that could be enforced with the fine, so this could still be potentially enforced with the fine?
I think what's enforced with the fine is that the owner is not providing the information.
Okay.
So it's in the prior one, it's that the owner is not providing information in the registration material. So if you don't provide that information, there will be a consequence.
Okay, all right, that's a little bit different. All right.
Sorry for the confusion on that.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's why we have these discussions. I just want to be very careful about rhetoric that is aimed at losing our homes to short-term rentals. That sounds a bit like fear-mongering to me, because we don't really have numbers. We don't have facts. We don't have statistics. I'd also caution counselors that are questioning counselors' due diligence on these matters, because they maybe haven't been around. Because I think counselors do their own research. We pay attention. I know I personally have been paying attention to council matters before I was privileged enough to sit in the seat. Slowing down, stepping back, and holding off does not give us the facts we need to move forward. And it doesn't give us numbers, it doesn't give us statistics, and it doesn't give us options to tweak this in the future if need be. I think this is a first step that will give us facts, and then we can react to that. If that is the interpretation, Attorney Duggan, I will actually remove my amendment. Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Jones. Thank you.
I'll remove my second.
All right. So we have two motions on the floor. Attorney Duggan, to Counselor McBride's point, is it possible to pass two different motions on the same agenda item?
You'd probably join them together, wouldn't you?
Or should you just make another motion for one and
You do a
three?
third motion for the two items, wouldn't you?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, McBride, Counselor McBride, would you like to make a third motion
Yeah, I'm not
for
sure.
alternatives 1 and 3?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to read it, but my motion would be for, to pass the, recommend the, number 3, recommend the approval of the draft ordinance as written, in number 1, schedule a joint meeting with PZC, Planning and Zoning, and the Town Council, and I would like to add in the EDC, Economic Development Committee, and report back.
And I will second that.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that?
Yeah, it's number 1 and number 3 combined. Recommend the approval of the ordinance as is, and also to add number 1, schedule a joint meeting with Planning and Zoning and the Town Council, and I added in the Economic Development Committee, and report back.
Okay, so we got 3 motions. First motion is alternatives, first one we will be voting on is alternatives 1 and 3. Second one we will be voting on is alternative 1. And the third one we will be voting on is alternative 3.
So a point of clarification, with the elimination of the amended motion on the floor, it would then, just so we would revert back to, for these, I guess the newest motion and the first motion, back to the original ordinance, which would mean that upon passing this ordinance this evening in Cal, it would not be subjected to a public hearing. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's a great mistake.
Counselor Franco?
I have heard information that was stated tonight that we went over this a year ago. Actually, I was looking here on my emails, and I see it on like the agenda in October of 2021. And it was scheduled to come back onto our agenda on November 3rd of 2021. And that was right before, like, new council came in. And this was something we worked on right up until the end. So this wasn't like years ago we worked on this and it's just been sitting. This was something we worked on right up until, like, election time, and we were dealing with this. So this is not something from long ago. And when it comes to planning and zoning, I understand that some people may want to work with them and they think that's a good idea, but I honestly don't know what's going to come from working with planning and zoning, and what are we going to collaborate on. And I don't know how that meeting is going to go, and I don't know how we're going to collaborate with EDC, or I'm not exactly sure. We have literally been working on this for way before COVID started. And it's like, if we want to bring this back, we don't have to pass both of these at the same time. We can deal with this incrementally in another time. Pass it and then give it some time. Let's get the data, get the research on it, and then let's figure out a path forward. That's my thought. I don't know what, if we pass this, what going to planning and zoning is going to change, because we still don't have data. So that's something that can be brought up in the future, and I would still like to just have us pass the original motion as is and leave it nice and clean and address this after we have data. Thank you.
Counselor Bordelon?
My problem with this ordinance is it's not very clean. It's as a person that served on the short-term committee who did a lot of work and sat through many hours of folks coming from all different walks of life, of different ones that they own from the city side and the city didn't want to be a part of this enforcement to, it's been a long haul, and looking at it now and reviewing it again from before, it almost seems like it's outdated, in a large sense. And I do think there needs to be more collaboration, and I think there needs to generate another public hearing, because it's back around the table a year later. There's new people that have developed and opened up short-term rentals since we even discussed this. Not having the chance to come around the table again and really getting the pulse of the community in its true fashion, and allowing the notice to go out before prematurely, in my opinion, voting on something tonight is not going to be helpful. We only have public comment once a month. It would be at the next meeting. What are we going to do, rush through after everyone speaks and then quickly try to change things and go back and forth? We're not doing our best job at that hour and in that capacity. If we allow for a public hearing
Point
to
of order.
happen, then
What's your point of order?
She can't talk to my ability and how I'm going to behave at a certain hour of the night.
I'm talking about myself.
Councilors should keep their comments away from the abilities of other councilors.
I'll speak to my ability then. Everything I speak to will be about my ability. It's not appropriate to, at the last minute, be trying to take comments on the night of the vote to do this. We need to set the time apart and allow people to come around the table and hear from them. It should be cast far and wide. That way everyone has a chance. I think if we do this, there are folks that are going to be missing out. I think if we do this in this capacity, this is not just getting a number pulse, because if that was the case, we could just send out something and say, I'd like everyone who owns an Airbnb or rents one to please contact Groton, and we take a tally of them and we write them all down. We don't need all this other stuff of where to put your trash cans to get that data. So if we truly want to just get where they're located, we could do that and then sit around this and have our due diligence. A public hearing could be, anyone who has one, please come out, we'd like to track them. So again, I can't support moving something along, even as a person who served on the committee. I do not feel it's a strong document as it's written right now, and I feel like there's more work that could go into it because we've learned so much more. Thank you.
Councilor Baumgartner?
Yes, John, we're going to run through that list again. So on page 38, so does this ordinance address registration requirement for all STRs within the town as drafted?
Yes.
Publicizing or identifying local contacts, STR owner or registered manager responsible for handling problems. This could be posted at the home, in town hall, in the STR registration.
Yes.
Residency requirements for STR owners, such as on-site, in-town, et cetera, including prohibition of corporate or investment owners, or specifically making it primary, STRs only for primary residents.
Nope.
Nope, and that's a very big one. Off-street parking standards.
Yes.
Yeah, it does state that a plan should be shown to renters. So I think that's a kind of yes.
And that was going to be stripped with Councilor Kasiri's amendment?
What this plan, the way the ordinance reads right now is just a plot plan depicting where it is. It's not saying how many spaces should be required. It's just saying, so I guess it all depends on, so off-street parking standards, I would probably say no, it doesn't have standards. It just states where parking should be.
And just for clarity, Councilor Kasiri's amendment is off the floor.
Yes. Noise and nuisance provisions.
No.
No. Garbage collection requirements.
No.
Regulation or prohibition of pets.
Nope.
Spacing requirements between STRs. A distance from one STR to another may be required to assure that an entire block does not turn into a short-term rental district, which is happening right now.
I think no on that one, no on the caps, and
And the cap, so
they're actually,
so just quickly on the caps. So caps on STRs allow a numerical or percentage cap on the number of registered STRs per neighborhood, zip code, census tract, or other geography. That's a no.
that's a no.
Occupancy limits, numbers of persons who may stay in the home per bedroom, et cetera.
Yes.
That's yes, okay. Visitor limits, such as prohibiting parties or non-guests of any kind?
No?
No. Proof of code compliance, fire safety measures, adequate water and sewer service, or other utilities or infrastructure that may be of concern?
No?
Requirements for notifying neighbors?
No?
Limitations on turnover, there may be a minimum stay or a maximum number of days that STR operates.
In the definition section, it does state that an STR is defined as something that's no more than 30 days.
No more than 30 days. Limitations on areas where short-term rentals are not allowed or are not regulated.
No?
And then lastly, imposition of a penalty schedule and fines for violations.
Yes?
Yes, and in my eye, in agreement with Councilor Franco, what we have written, I think, is not sufficient. There needs to be more teeth in those fines. How am I for time?
You got a minute and a half?
Thank you. So, as we've just gone through this very critical table that kind of outlines what we can do through the Code of Ordinances as opposed to the zoning regs, and we didn't even get through that left column because that's not our job, that's planning and zoning. And I think it's critically important as a council, we have that conversation with planning and zoning to understand what their role is too. That way, what we do dovetails nicely with what they do on the regulatory side and in terms of zoning enforcement, and zoning compliance. So it is my belief that we need to work in tandem with planning and zoning to do our due diligence. Yes, we've discussed this issue ad nauseum. And I will not fault any counselor for wanting to work on this issue now. I'm in agreement with you. We need to work on this now. In fact, we should have probably worked on it a few months back. But we're here now. We're here to work. And I really do hope that we can support Councilor Bordelon's initial amendment. I'll just leave it at that. I think you know where I stand, but we should really slow this down. Thank you.
Councilor Kasiri?
No first-time speakers?
Oh, well,
Okay.
this is technically first time on everyone. Go.
Okay.
I'm happy to yield to Councilor Parker.
Councilor Parker?
A few things. Thank you all for putting out your emotions on the floor. But this is only a tentative thing. We're just getting registrations right now. Number 2, can this Horsley Witten group chart be posted online? I don't know if it's been posted yet. Thank you.
It already has been.
Thank you. And for the part we're looking at, regulation of short-term rentals, which is our page 38, it'll probably be page 5, 6, or 7 online. It says, should the town decide to regulate STRs, below is a recap of the types of things that could be regulated and where. Could be. Keyword, could be. So we have some of the stuff within the body. I understand working with P and Z, but we're 2 different committees. We are the regulatory body, the legislative body. They will bring stuff to us, suggestions to us. We can vote it down or accept it. So even if we got together as a working group, we could all decide to vote against what they're bringing forward to us. So I just want us to be mindful of what our committees do, because not all the committees that we have now are ABC committees, going over all of them. Do we work hand in hand? They send stuff to us and we go over it, and we can vote it down. So we're going to have another committee meeting to discuss this. Yes, we can do that after the fact, but we need something right now. A lot of people have been asking for this for years, that we do something. We need to at least have a beginning. The same thing we did with the plastic ordinance. Yes, I was one of the ones that said it should have been taken time, but we passed it. We need to pass something for all the people so we can regulate at least a beginning. I hear all the concerns, but my thought process is a regulatory body will get all the numbers that we need, the data that we need, and proceed forward. And mind you, this is only for the town of Groton, not for Groton Long Point, not for City of Groton. No one has something different. So we're just taking this slow. Each process we do, as everything else we've done, we either have had to bring it back or did not. So if we can just go ahead and be mindful of people's time, because we still do have one more item. It's 9:45, and I would like to move the previous question, because we've been on this for almost an hour, and if I move the question.
Okay, motion to move the question by Counselor Parker. Second?
Oh, second.
Second by Counselor Jones. This requires 2/3, which is 6. And it's not debatable. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oppose.
Abstention? Okay, so that carries 6 in favor, 3 opposed. Baumgardner, Bordelon, Westervelt, 0 abstaining. Okay, so first we'll vote on Counselor McBride's motion, which is alternatives 1 and 3. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I have 4 ayes. Counselor Jones, Westervelt, McBride and Melendez. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Franco, Baumgardner, Bordelon. Was that Kasiri? Okay. Abstentions?
I'm the last.
Okay, so that fails. 4 in favor. Jones, Westervelt, McBride, Melendez. 4 against. Franco, Baumgardner, Bordelon, Kasiri. 1 abstaining. Parker. On to Councilor Bordelon's motion, alternative 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's Baumgardner, Bordelon, Westervelt. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Kasiri, McBride, Melendez, Jones, Franco, and Parker. And that's 0 abstaining. On to Councilor Franco's motion, which is alternative 3. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Kasiri, Parker, Franco, Jones, Melendez. Opposed? Baumgardner, Bordelon, Westervelt. Abstaining?
Aye.
McBride. If carries 5 in favor, 3 opposed, Baumgardner, Bordelon, Westervelt, 1 abstaining, McBride. Thank you. On to Local 818 CBA 2022, page 39.
Would you like me to read the motion?
Do you want the motion first, or do we got something to say?
Just maybe what this item is, just
Sure.
a couple sentences.
Sure, so we're here to talk about the tentative agreement between Local 818 AFSCME Council 4 and the town. The union has in fact voted to ratify the agreement, and so we're here to review the tentative agreement and address ratification with the council.
Thank you. I hereby move that the members of the Town Council Committee of the Whole, together with Town Manager John Burt, Director of Human Resources, Risk Management, Arnisha Green, and Town Attorney Eileen Duggan, go into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy and/or negotiations with respect to collective bargaining with Local 818 of Council 4 AFSCME, This action is taken without prejudice to the council's right to discuss such matters in a private meeting pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 1-200. So moved.
Second.
Moved by Melendez, seconded by Parker. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. We are in executive session at 9:51. It's off, right? The Zoom? Executive session at 10:15. I hereby move that the Town Council Committee of the Whole approve the request for funds necessary to implement the agreement between the Town of Groton and Local 818 of Council for AFSCME for the period July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. So moved. Moved by Melendez, seconded by Baumgartner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously, 9 in favor, 0 opposed, 0 abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Counselor Parker, seconded by Counselor Franco. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? We're adjourned unanimously at 10:16.